Good evening. I would like to call to order the Keizer City Council in regular session. It is Monday, August 21st, 2023, and ask our city recorder to please call roll.
Councilor Reed?
Here.
Councilor Hessman?
Here.
Mayor Clark?
Here.
Council President Starr? Here. Councilor Duran?
Here.
Councilor Cross?
Here.
Councilor Kohler?
Councilor Kohler is excused this evening. Thank you very much. If you are able, I invite you to rise and invite all of you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all very much for joining us on this beautiful summer evening. Very thankful for the cooler weather, very thankful. Tonight we have no items under special orders of business, so I will go straight to committee reports. And we have Lisa Sajeka here from the Keizer Parks Board.
Is this on? Yeah, it's on. Okay. Mayor, council, members of staff. Hi, I'm Lisa Sajeka. I'm the vice chair of the Parks Board, and I'm filling in for the open seat on the Parks Board to give the Parks report. The big news is that the Parks Tour is next month. It's September 11th. We are meeting, instead of meeting here, we're meeting at Keizer Rapids Amphitheater at 6. And then we're gonna go walk around the new paths and things there. Then we're gonna head to Ben Miller and then Bob Newton. Because we're having that meeting on the 11th, we're gonna cancel the regular Parks report, the Parks meeting on the 12th. So if you usually tune in or come down, don't do that because we are not going to be here. Items of business, we talked a little bit about the possibility of putting up a little bit of fencing along Alder on Ben Miller. You know, some people liked it, some people didn't like it. You know, there was a talk of maybe some alternate barriers that would slow down children, but not, you know, make it a fenced area that people felt like they could just unleash and let things run. So anyway, it's all just a discussion, but that was something that was brought up. Clear Lake, they're graveling the path between the neighborhood and the school to get ready for the school year so that people walking from their neighborhoods aren't going to have to go through the mud when the rains come. And Ben Miller, since they updated the play structure, has been busy every time I've driven by, every time anybody on Parks Board has driven by, people are using the heck out of that park now, and it's amazing. It's really good to see. Splash pad, lots of use. We wish we could figure out a way to get it running every day, but we know the limitations and we're just lucky to have it when we have it, and it's wonderful. I love the art on the splash pad. And the big news at Keizer Rapids Park is the person who was doing a lot of the graffiti on the paths has been caught. So there's not as much points of interest along the path as there used to be. Which is nice. It's really nice. Park staff aren't having to do as much hiking. in search for little treasures, hidden Easter eggs here and there. So, sorry. It's been a long day.
You're awesome.
So anyway, that's our news. It was a great meeting. It's always a great meeting. Everybody should come to the parks meetings because parks are the best place to be. If you can't be here, go to the park. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you very much. So everybody caught that the Parks Tour starts at Keizer Rapids at the amphitheater. The tour starts at 6. Council, please be there around 5:30 if you can. And Councilor Husband has a question.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Lisa, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You're absolutely right. If I wasn't here, I definitely want to be at a park on a day like today, so.
Yes.
Completely understand. There was an item, Council President Starr, I believe, mentioned this a little while back, and Mr. Lawyer did as well, that Public Works is looking into the parking situation at a couple places, I believe Bob Newton Park in particular. Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there any follow-up on that? Or?
I haven't heard any follow-up. I know that one of the reasons we're going to Bob Newton on the parks tour so we can look at that situation. So it gives people a visual, because a lot of people don't know that they don't know.
For sure.
So we're going to go there, we'll see it, and that will help us have that discussion. And I know that Bob Newton is also close to being next on the list for updating play structures. So, and one of the other reason is that we wanted to see brand new play structure versus ready to be updated play structure.
Oh, definitely.
So, anyway.
And I'll drop the seed in Mr. Lawyer's head too, but I wanted
And
to get
it may grow, we should water it.
Yeah, you know, I wanted to get it out there in the public forum too,
Yeah.
that in addition to the car parking spaces, we do, I believe, want to consider some bike parking, especially in a park like Bob Newton, which is so neighborhood
Yes.
central, and where you definitely see the families and the kids on bikes that are able to come
Right.
out. Just the more we can, I'm a bit of a broken record on this, right, Lisa? You've heard me say it before, but the more we provide some of that opportunity, the more people that are going to use the park. And Bob Newton especially is a nice big space. It can accommodate that, I believe.
Yes. And you're going to have to update that to like a scratch CD or an MP3 player with a bad spot. I don't know.
Oh, I'm definitely still stuck in the vinyl era, but
All
thank you for suggesting.
It's coming back.
The one thing that I forgot to mention was, of course, because we all report on Keizer Rapids Park, there have been lots and lots of places where people have had small warming fires along the river close to trees that appear to be dying because of all the heat and the prolonged dryness. I see lots of cigarette butts. I know that our parks are always a no smoking area, and that we have the no burn signs on all the parks. But just be, I mean, I want the world at large just to be aware that even though Marion County seems to have relaxed some of their burning standards today, that the parks still, I don't want to set our parks on fire.
No, nobody's in favor of that.
No,
for sure.
nobody's
Yeah.
in that, yeah, but. I
Thank you
mean,
for making us aware, and we'll keep getting the word out. And I know that our parks staff patrols very regularly to see what's going on down there. Yeah, it's very, very bad for the trees.
Yeah, no, the park staff are the best.
Yeah.
I mean, our staff at Keizer are exemplary anyway, but I've never had a bad encounter with anybody who works in the parks. They're all good. So, anyway.
Thank you. Any further questions? I just have one. Council President Starr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Brown, how are we looking on the timeline for cameras for the parks?
We have one final location to approve with the county. And I reached out to their administrator about it. Haven't heard back, but I'll keep trying. But I think there's one location before we can bid it out.
And then they all go up at once?
I'll go out to bid, yep.
Or it'll all go out to bid? Okay, and then what are we looking for from there, timeline? Like, I'm looking for timeline and, like, when it will be done.
Yeah, let me work on that,
Okay, thanks.
put that together.
Good question. Thank you very much. Anything further? All right, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
And love your pictures on Facebook for our parks.
Thank you. They're very photogenic.
You also make them look good. All right, that is all I have signed up for public comment. Ms. Tischer, I know you want to talk about the item 8B. So do you want to speak now, or do you want to speak at that, when we get to that agenda item?
I'm okay to wait.
Okay. And I think you'll like some of the conversation that's going to happen around that as well. So stay tuned. Okay, so I'll put you there. I'm not allowed to say anything about that because then, you know, it jinxes it. Yeah, I'm going to go to Carol Dorfler to talk about Verda. Because that's all I have for committee reports. So we're going to public comment.
Good evening. My name is Carol Dorfler and I reside in Keizer.
Pull the microphone to you if you would,
Closer?
please.
Closer yet?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Thank
Better?
you. Yes.
Okay. Two things. I wrote down Verda Lane. I just would like to know where we are with any safety issues to help with that situation over there. And Mr. Lawyer is not here.
He's at a conference
Yeah.
this week.
I drove by there the other day. They have half the sidewalks in, and the other half is fenced, which means now that the kids are going to have to walk across the street down the ditch, which is along the ditch.
It's under construction.
Yeah, and we have 2 weeks till kids go back to school there, and that's really concerning. I counted it.
Yeah.
Yep. So is there anything we can do to lower that speed limit like we talked about before? I thought we were able to do that kind of thing. No? We can.
Yes and no. So the legislation did make it easier to apply for larger drops in your speed, but it still has to go through the application process and has to be approved. So it's not something we can do unilaterally, no. I know, I was hoping so too, but they didn't give us this power. We'll have to talk to our legislators about making it even easier. In the meantime, though, Mr. Brown, has there been communication with Kennedy School to get the word out to school parents on the construction project and the students getting there?
I'll have to check if there is. I've not been made aware that there is. The sidewalk on the south side of it is complete and also on the north, right? So there's nothing changed from the last school year,
Right.
right?
So coming Dearborn and Chamawa, yes, they can cross and then they can get onto Keizer Road or come up Dearborn and then go up the street to the school. So there are the same routes that they've always had. So they can definitely stay off of Verda, and they always have been able to stay off of Verda by crossing at those designated crosswalks. And I think that's how the school has been asking them to go, is to use those to get across at those, controlled crossings and then get to the school that way. So if you would check to make sure that's the messaging going out, and that if they have not let parents know about the construction on Verda in that section, that would be helpful.
They must know.
Well, yeah, I hope so,
They
but
must know. If it was my child,
I understand that.
would not be walking to school. Just would not be walking to school. I would just make sure that there was another way, that
Right.
we've
You can't assume anymore.
No, you can't. The second item I had, and Mr. Lawyer is not here, but I will thank him publicly, the council, the city, for the speed table that's going in, being installed as we speak on Cummings Lane. And hopefully, that's going to help that situation at that really strange little corner that's right there. It's always been a strange little corner. I was a crossing guard there, and it's so let's hope that tames things down. And I thank you. And the West Keizer neighborhood thanks you too.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, that is everybody I have signed up for public comment tonight. Is there anyone else who would like to address the council on any matter? Other than that, on the agenda, scheduled for public hearing, and we have no public hearings. Going once, going twice. All right, let's get on to then our administrative action. The first is item 8A, which is resolution establishing the Keizer Emergency Planning Committee, repealing Resolution R 2009-1987. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council. Got my mic on here, and can we go live with the screen?
Yeah. Oh, I guess Melissa's coming too. Okay. And while we're getting ready, I want to thank Mr. Brown for shifting from last Monday to tonight for this presentation, so we could conclude what I felt was a very productive work session with all of our neighborhood associations. So, thank you.
All right, and does he set the input back there? Or does it...
Technology.
All right, there we go. A little bit off keel, but so I will make the update on the emergency management as brief as I can, but I also don't want to stop any discussion that you may have, so feel free to slow me down or ask questions during out. But this emergency management was the kind of a hot potato when I came here that nobody wanted. And the impact of that was the council was stepping in to cover the needs during some of the events that that you experienced over the last couple of years. So I wanted to cover very basic terms. NIMS is the National Incident Management System. That was created post 9/11 by the Bush administration to standardize the national approach to emergency management. The ICS, which is the Incident Command System, is the, if you will, kind of the system for the command, control, and coordination of the response. So it is provide structure to the emergency response.
Madam Mayor.
Oh, a question from Councilor Reed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So back just a couple years ago, we had to do all of this training to get to do NIM certification and understand all of this. Do we have to do, is that an ongoing thing? Do we have to do that periodically, or was that just kind of a one-off to be eligible for the federal dollars?
Yeah, Chief, if you know differently, please correct me, but I believe it's a one-off. And there's a lot to it. I'm getting ahead of not, so I think that's correct. There's a lot to it, and it's something that if you don't stay involved with, it's hard to remember. You know, what does logistics do? What does operations do? What does planning section do? The safety officer, the liaison, all these positions. So, yeah, unfortunately, it checks a box for FEMA, but unless you stay involved in it, it's hard to keep up with.
Madam Mayor, may I do a follow-up? Thank you. I would recommend that you include this as part of training for new counselors, because you know, we shouldn't have to wait for the events in order to, so that might be something to roll in with.
You had to do it, right?
Oh, did you?
So yes, yeah.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, we required everybody to do 100, 200, and I think 700 and 800.
Seven.
Just 700. Okay.
Okay, great. I did not know that, so thank you.
But if I may, the continuing education is definitely an important thing.
Right, there's so much to it. It is very, very difficult to, I mean, I have trouble remembering it earlier in my career. And I'm still not as familiar as the professional emergency managers. But what this is, NIMS and ICS, the Incident Command System, is the structure that is used by law enforcement and fire for every incident that they manage it. Every response is an incident, and ICS is scalable so that if it's a small house fire that a fire department's using, they have a scaled incident command system. And if it gets large, like hurricane, then it comes up to a regional and sometimes a national level. So they're all scaled and aligned, but it provides a common structure for if Louisiana is working with Mississippi and Alabama or FEMA, they all understand the structure and what's who makes decisions and when. So I wanted to just review some of the progress we've made this past year. We've got a great relationship with Marion County Emergency Management. They've been incredibly supportive of all of our efforts. We have a relationship with Salem Keizer School District Emergency Manager, and I've been a co-incident commander, honestly probably more of a shadow, with the Shemeketa Emergency Management Manager in a tabletop exercise, the Chariots Emergency Management, the Red Cross, and our Keizer CERT is an active group that's using our facility, using our space where the Emergency Operations Center is located on a regular basis. So you can see we're going to ask you to slot them into the Emergency Planning Committee because of some vacancies that exist there. Lana is the permit tech over in Public Works that assists me with emergency management. And her and I have participated in 2 of the tabletop exercises with Marion County. And she's been trained up. She's got 1, 2, 3, 7, and 800. 300 and 400 classes are 2-day full, 2 full-day exercise classes. So it's usually a training and then a second day of tabletop. Very, very intensive training. So she's done a great job, gotten up to speed. We had one department head left to receive his incident command. He's taken his first 2, and I took additional class this year, ICS 346. One of the things we've evaluated this past year is the radio that's in City Hall. There's a phone that looks like something that would be on your nightstand in 1985 or 1990. It's not a rotary dial, so it's not that old. But it is remarkably a phone that communicates with our radios of our public works employees in the field. It is not operational now, but it is, like I said, the radio to talking to them. Even in small events, or if you've gone to a concert or some large gathering, the state fair, your cell phone will be difficult to use even in large situations because of the bandwidth. So redundancy is the word in emergency management, and this radio communication is important to when cell phones aren't working, we have a way to communicate with them. So we need $7,200 to get that back into working order. Haven't worked on finding a source for that, but we will work on that. Our budget for emergency management is only $1,000 each year, and $1,000, yeah. We're not sure.
Question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can we work on that for next year?
Yeah, and it really, we probably need an assessment of, this is one need. I don't know that there's a lot of others. We need to evaluate our emergency operations center. There's a pile of old laptops in there. that have not been used largely, but they're not, we don't need a high level of functionality on those computers. It's basically a web interface is what we need, but we do need to go through those and see if that makes more sense. Many of us that are going to be in an emergency operations center now have our own laptop that we would carry in there and use. And that's honestly more ideal than starting up a machine that you're not familiar with. So we need a more robust evaluation of what the future looks like. But I don't want to set like a heavy expectation that it's going to be very expensive. But the other thing, because we are up to date, we're participating. We are notarized or wasn't I right the word recognized by Marion County. We are eligible for grant funding from FEMA. So FEMA, this might be a small project that could be funded through various different sources. So this year we established quarterly emergency management meetings. And so we've met on every 5th Tuesday. Tuesdays are our management team meetings and our leadership team meetings. And so the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, we dedicated the 5th ones to emergency management. So our next one's on October 31st. And we've had great participation from our community partners in those meetings. I think big growth was organizing all of our emergency operations center files into a singular place. So they are all in a drive that is shared by myself and Lana, so we can update things. We have all our mutual aid agreements, all our contacts are updated, all of our quick references forms, everything we need is there on a shared drive. So. Okay, so that kind of brings us up to the speed. The emergency operations plan status. Chief Teague is the author of what we have now. Back in 2008, before he left for Dallas a while and then came back as our chief. So it was a great plan back in 2008. It just has not been updated since then. So it's a little bit out of date. When we identify, it's all based on risk assessment for emergency planning. So you identify what are the natural hazards that we would be exposed to here. Earthquakes is an obvious one. They're there. Severe weather. Those are basically the same as they were in 2008. What has developed since then is the man-made disasters, and we need annexes for how to deal with those man-made disasters, such as cyber attacks, terrorism, civil disorder, biological or chemical threats. Unfortunately, those are a reality. That would also probably include active shooter incidents. Madam Mayor, I think one of the counselors has a question.
Sorry, I was thinking about something else. Councilor Haspin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Appreciate the interruption, Mr. Brown. I'll try to make this brief, but we did just come out of a pandemic, or are still technically within the pandemic as the novel coronavirus continues to re-emerge in our communities. Our public health, I don't want to say disasters, but major public health occurrences going to be a part of the emergency operations plan? Are they currently?
They would fall under the incident command system. And in my last city, I opened the Emergency Operations Center for the pandemic, and that allowed us to receive reimbursement of 75% of the costs that we incurred to make the City Hall more safe for stopping the spread.
Was that through FEMA, or how were those funds received? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, through FEMA.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Those were the, that first round of CARES Act. Those, are you talking about the changes we made here at the Civic Center for
CARES Act, there was two. There
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
one under the Trump administration, and then there was a second one under
Right.
the Biden.
So CARES,
Administration.
CRISA, that was all before the ARPA. I know,
Yep.
it's alphabet soup.
But that was
People are
different
listening.
funding, actually. The reimbursable expenses available, for
Oh, yeah.
instance, you put up, is that plexiglass, or it's not real glass, right? It's at the counters,
Yeah.
right? That would all have been reimbursable with 75% of cost. So we did things like that at the city hall and got reimbursed through any materials, supplies, masks, all those things reimbursable. That didn't come out of CARES Act money or the following one. This was just straight from FEMA. The other thing I think from a very basic thing to understand is that Oregon has emergency management set up to work through counties, through county government. So if Keizer wants to open their emergency operations center, we notify Marion County, and then Marion County notifies Department of Emergency Management. We don't go straight to Office of Emergency Management in city government. So that's just the way it's set up in the state of Oregon. So we spent some time, staff, marking up our emergency operations plan and some of the missing parts to it, mutual aid agreements. And then Marion County received a grant to allow a professional emergency manager to help the cities update all their plans. So that's a great thing because we don't have a professional emergency manager, so this gives us some expertise to build on the stuff that we've marked up already. And honestly, and there's a lot more to be added to it in those incident annexes for the man-made disasters that I personally couldn't author, and I'm not sure anybody in our staff could personally author. So, so that's really great, and we appreciate that partnership with the county. The city ordinance has it set up that changes to the emergency operations plan are made by this Keizer Emergency Planning Committee. Sometimes those plans are approved by city councils, and I wasn't sure, Chief, was that change made in 2008-9, or did it exist prior to that, the Keizer Emergency Planning Committee?
Madam Mayor, I seem to recall that council approved the 2008 plan. And if you're speaking to changes afterwards, I don't recall those going to council on a per change basis. Just there's too many of them.
Well, and there was another reason why not too, was it was explained to me that, council action, kind of broadcasting what our emergency operation plan was it made us more vulnerable for people who were like, ooh, let's see if I can beat it, take it as a challenge to see if we can get around what we have set up here. So that was part of the reason, but I think it was more because at that point, the council had already approved having a functional emergency operation plan, and then it was up to staff under that direction to make that happen and keep it current. That's how I understood it. Mayor at that time was Lori Christopher. I was on council. That's how I recall it.
And that's kind of how I interpreted it as I read through the creation of it and things. And actually, I think it's a good idea because it brings professionals, people involved in the emergency management to the table to approve those changes. So we have an opportunity to update the emergency operations plan. And we have this Keizer Emergency Planning Committee that was established in 2009. But the composition of that needs to be changed because some of those positions aren't here and some of those organizations aren't here anymore. So it was a committee of 12, a Keizer emergency manager, the police emergency manager, city manager, chief of police, public works director. EVAC was an organization, and you all know this better than I do, but EVAC was an organization that was created after the 1996 floods.
Correct.
Right, as a citizen-involved emergency committee.
Carol was there.
Yeah. So, but it's my understanding that they don't exist anymore as an organization. So
Correct.
that's one of the reasons that we need an update. There was a council liaison, but you'll see later, we decided to take that liaison name off because council is a voting member of this committee. So a liaison would suggest that it's not a voting member of it. So the Marion County Emergency Manager, which makes sense in the context of how Oregon is set up, Citizen Large, Keizer Fire District, and the American Red Cross. That's how it's currently set up. So after kicking this around our staff and also talking about it at our quarterly meeting with our partners, this is the makeup that we came up with. We don't currently have a Keizer emergency manager that I'm fulfilling that function. So we've changed that language to say the Keizer emergency manager or a city manager designee. So I would be on there, but I'd also be able to appoint another person to that committee. The chief of police on there, the chief of police didn't think that we needed a second police position like we had in the first committee. The public works director, and like I alluded to earlier, the community emergency response team in Keizer is active, and we believe they should fill a spot in that new makeup. Still a council, I left liaison on that slide. But a council position on that, I think in the ordinance, Shannon corrected it, so. And then the Marion County Emergency Manager, a citizen at large that would be appointed by the city council, Keizer Fire District, American Red Cross, and then because Marion County Fire District 1 also covers part of the city of Keizer, we would add them as a seat. And then also the Salem Emergency Manager or designee of the city manager. Their emergency manager was hired by Marion County. So Greg is now the Marion County Emergency Manager, but they have backfilled that seat in Salem right now. So they have a Salem Emergency Preparedness Coordinator. I've talked to him, made sure it was okay. Reason why they would be included in it is because we're a neighboring city that shares assets and shares a lot of operational plans. So that's why they were included on that. So next up is what we're asking you to do is to amend the Emergency Planning Committee after your discussion of it. Work with the county, professional emergency management support. And one of the things we want to do this year is start rotating our other department heads through the tabletop exercises with Marion County Emergency Management, because outside of a real emergency, the tabletop exercises are the best place to learn how it functions, and they do a really good. What I'd really like to do is work up to an opportunity where we can do our own tabletop exercise in coordination with Marion County and exercise that multi-jurisdiction communication. And then also to find funds to fix our radio system.
That's an ongoing thing. Councilor Husband.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Brown, do you mind just telling us a little bit more about what a tabletop exercise is comprised of?
Yes, sorry, you get used to these terms.
It's okay. We just want to know how the game is played.
Yeah, they're actually very difficult to plan. Fortunately, communities share these tabletop exercises. There's a whole script for it, and so think of what the last. Well, I'll just tell you one that we've done in another state was many water plants have gas chlorine. Gas chlorine is very toxic, so we did this exercise of having a gas chlorine spill. Gas chlorine creates a visible cloud that is very low and it's lethal, and it will basically blow with the wind direction until it dissipates enough to where it's non-lethal. But if you were to get in a cloud of chlorine gas, it would kill you. So it was an exercise designed around that, and so you get notified, and these exercises are planned so that there's injects in that. Okay, and we had a wind shift northwestern lead, And it's now in the path of this daycare association. So there are these constant injects throughout the day, throughout the morning, that make it interesting, and then everybody's adapting to these injects. So
It's role-playing.
that's role-playing.
It's role-playing. Yeah.
That's right. Yep.
I appreciate you talking through the scenario.
Yeah.
It must have been eye-opening on a number of levels to see what kind of decisions were out there to be made.
Yeah, I always learn something about these different types of emergencies that I didn't know about on these tabletop exercises, in addition to learning how the information moves in and things get purchased and bought and acquired, and then also the recovery also is part of the emergency management too. So they're very educational.
And thank you for letting me ask that.
Absolutely, that was a good question, and for people who are watching, you know, to make sure that we all understand what we're talking about and the tools that we have available to us for making sure our staff is prepared, have thought through scenarios, and actually done the work, because the last thing you want is to get into an emergency and not know the basic tools that are available to you. Training is absolutely critical, so thank you for that. Council President Smith, wow. Star. There was an email that just popped up from her, and I'm like, brain freeze. I'm gonna turn my phone over now. Thank you. Thank you, Shani.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And former Council President Smith is one I aspire to follow in her footsteps. So just a couple of questions. Mr. Brown, I appreciate the work that went into this, and it looks very thorough. And I'm guessing you probably have talked about the questions that I'm going to ask. But in regards to the committee makeup, it's kind of it's a three-part question. I don't see anybody from healthcare on there, like a hospital, nor do I see anybody from, and I'm just going to take a look once more before I say this, but from the school district. And then, so those two questions about where are they or why do we not have them on here? And then a question about, does this appendix and this ordinance limit the committee to this number of people? So if you get into this a year, or even after 2 meetings and decide we need somebody else at the table, does it have to come back for an amendment? The way that it's written, did we leave the opportunity to add more as needed? And then I'm curious about the term of office. It looks to me that the people on the committee or the positions that you have on the committee are very positional, save for the citizen at large position, which is like an appointed person, individual. So why would we need term limits on positional members of the committee, say the American Red Cross? Why would we want them to have a 3-year term limit?
It could just stand as a check. Shannon's assistant is excellent at putting these bookmarks in our calendar to, when things pop up, say, hey, you need to look at this. So in a way, it could be just serve as a flag, but it's not necessary. And then to just the earlier part of the question, the makeup, there's other partners that are involved in our emergency management that are not on the committee, but they are part of the Keizer Emergency Management. For example, Chariots comes to our meetings and participates with us. The Salem Keizer School District Emergency Manager has come to our meetings and participated. So it doesn't limit us from having them involved in our emergency management. This is just the committee that approves changes to the plan. We could consult with those expertise if we were looking at specific elements of the plan that impacted them.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Further questions? Councilor Husband?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Brown, understand that I'm not putting you on the spot here, but this is such a complex topic and there are so many partners involved. Who else are you maybe trying to reach out to? Is there anybody that you just haven't yet gotten in contact with about some of this that you'd like to, or that you think would be pertinent for the community?
I think that's probably the incompetent incompetence. In other words, I don't know. But the people that have joined up with us and volunteered to be there at the table and shown up are all the ones that I would think of. If doing some more thought, maybe maybe our homeless Mid-Atlantic Valley Homeless Task Force. Some of our animal people, because there's a lot of thought been taken into how to deal with animals during emergencies, wildfires, pets, livestock.
Especially with like the San Am Canyon fire and the way that response was coordinated.
Yeah, most emergency plans have something in there about animals and or pets. But I would think the very basic ones that have been participating with this are the most essential. The college, the Salem Keizer School District, the county, the city of Salem has been an excellent partner, Chariots, and American Red Cross. For you those who know Daryl Fuller, he's been at all of our meetings, and the fire chiefs have supported us by sending either themselves or a delegate to them. So we've been really fortunate, and CERT also, we have them showing up. So all the main ones that you think of are at our table, and if given some time, there's probably a lot more people that we can invite. But it's been a very willing community.
Which is good. This is a tough topic. Everybody's stressed out about it, and everybody has it, I should think, pretty well top of mind with how things have been going in the Western United States over the past couple of years, to put it mildly. So it's great that those organizations get what they can. And yeah, I suppose some of it is if other organizations would like to come out of the woodwork and be involved, we should certainly welcome them, right? Just say, hey, let us know what you think, because it takes a community for sure to put these plans together.
Yeah, we won't turn away anybody.
Oh, yeah. And if I may, Councilor Husband, so looking at Appendix A, this is something that can be amended. So during the work of the committee, if they decide that there is an organization or an element that is missing, this can be amended. This is a resolution, not an ordinance. So it is very simple to bring it back for an amendment, and that's why we have these committees, commission, task force. When we do our resolutions, we put all the details in what we call Appendix A. That has all the detail, and there's a format that we use to make sure we've covered all the basics, the what, the why, the who, the when, the how, are all in these forms. So for people who are watching online or at home, if you go in the packet, it's page 26, and there's a lot of the details, and it is very amendable. And also, all of these meetings are open. If you have an organization, you can attend, you can listen in and become informed. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Adam, I just noticed something. The Salem Emergency Manager or designee of the city manager, I assume you mean designee of the Salem City Manager, if correct?
Yes.
Okay,
that's
I
correct.
would suggest adding that when you go for the resolution. Add that in the 12 spot under membership, to add the word Salem in front of city manager.
Okay.
I just noticed that.
Okay. So it'll be as amended. Got it. Okay, any questions before we put a motion on the table? I think that's where we're at now. Councilor Cross.
A quick question, that you mentioned Salem City Manager. So do we have a representative on their emergency response committee?
I talked to him last week, and I did not ask him if,
I guess I'm just curious about the thoughts behind it.
Yeah. I didn't think to ask him if they have a set up the same way where they have a emergency planning committee that approves their updates, or if it's a city council, but I'll ask him. It's a good question.
Okay, one more question. So what, have you seen that done before? I'm just wondering when they're all like, it seems like a lot of local county leaders why we would go to Salem and not Brooks also, or,
Well, Brooks isn't incorporated, but Salem, or there could be other cities, like you could say. And actually, we kicked it around with the executive leadership team. Honestly, the idea to add Salem to it was Chief Teague's idea, and he explained why. At first, I was like, why would we do that? And he made a pretty good case for it. Polk County, we also have some shared, he brought this to my attention too, we also have some shared plans about things that happen on the river.
right?
So we even thought about that, but it came down to those shared plans that, because we're abutting neighbors, it makes sense.
So did we compare our plan to their plan, or is it completely different? And we just wanted their input on ours?
We are stealing lots from their plan, actually, because their emergency manager, Greg Walsh, was hired by Marion County, and their incident annexes, we will probably be almost copying them because they're going to be the same for the most part.
I would have asked all these questions earlier if it would have said Salem, so thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I appreciate that. Chief, did you have anything to add there?
I guess, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll just punctuate what the city manager said. I mean, the purpose of the emergency operations plan is, at least at the local level, is to describe how we're going to manage resources. And we are so closely tied to Salem, it just made sense to bring Salem in the mix. The basic plans, they're by and large all the same, and the way we're going to respond is going to be all the same. I mean, among jurisdictions. Once you get into the incident annexes, it's very good to already have these folks who are very familiar with how things are going to work on their side at the table, so that we're not having to have those discussions during an emergency. We're having them as we're developing the plan or the incident annexes.
Does that help, Councilor Cross? Okay, good. Councilor Reed?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to point out, too, that this is not unprecedented. We had representatives from both the county and the city of Salem on the Stormwater Advisory Committee. And so, those relationships are sort of integral to regional success. And so we've had that already.
Thank you, that's a very good point. Appreciate that. I do have one question, and this has to do with the council member. Because it is a voting member and the person appointed would be not able to have, if they were not able to be present, a substitute would not be able to vote. I would like, and I'm directing this actually to Mr. Johnson, to change it where we can appoint a council member and have an appointed alternate who can vote in the absence of that member.
Okay.
And my reasoning is that this is important, and by having those, both the primary and the alternate able to vote and swap in, life happens. We're all volunteers.
Right.
Stuff happens. This is too important to have that seat empty.
Okay. So, and perhaps Mr. Brown can speak to this. This is, again, only for the plan, correct?
Mm-hmm.
This is not necessarily an ongoing committee after the plan's adopted?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Yes, this committee is for the purposes of any updates to the plan.
Okay.
So, I mean, we can make that change, but I think usually the idea behind a voting member is the continuity, so that the same member is there the previous meeting, so we don't have a change in position if you swap someone in. Whereas a liaison, of course, not a voting member, it's just to pass the ideas back and forth between the two bodies. So you do risk having kind of a sway in the policy if you just happen to have the permanent member not there one meeting and then you swap someone else in. But again, that's the council's purview if you wish to do it that way.
So what I will do is I'll bring that up as a potential amendment, and you guys can decide if you like it or not. And I'll make my case at that point. All right, that's the only question I had. Anything else before we put a motion on the table? Council President Starr?
I move the City Council adopt Resolution R 2023, establishing the Keizer Emergency Planning Committee, and repealing Resolution R 2009-1987.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the Keizer City Council adopt Resolution R 2023, establishing the Keizer Emergency Planning Committee, repealing Resolution R 2009-1987. Friendly amendment for Appendix A, number 12, to insert the word Salem, to clarify that the city manager under that line item is the Salem city manager. Does the mover accept?
Accepted.
Does the second accept?
Accept.
Okay, it is amended for that. I am actually, now I'm going to go back to the one I said I was going to bring up. And that is for item 6, the council member, and allow for a voting alternate. Does the mover accept?
Accepted.
The second?
Accepted.
It is so amended. Any other discussion on the motion? Good? All right, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, signify by saying no. Hearing no objection, motion passes unanimously with one absent, that's Councilor Kohler. Thank you all very much for this work. Looking forward to the result, and this is one of our short-term goals, to get this accomplished. And former Council President Smith and I appreciate that we would no longer have to be doing emergency social media. It was an experience. All right, let's go on now to, we'll get the lights back on. So we'll take a pause.
Say nothing of the fact that most social media wasn't around in its current form in 2008.
Yeah, but it was 2 years ago, and we used it a lot. All right. We are now going to go on to item 8B, which is an ordinance regulating parades, special events, and temporary closure of streets for block parties, repeal of ordinance number 90-178 and ordinance number 2000-419. And we'll go to, I believe it's Mr. Johnson. Is that correct? Or is Mr. Brown leading off?
I'll lead off
Okay.
for Shannon. This is one we, oh, no, actually, this is the one that I authored, sorry.
Yeah, it is
We
yours.
got a notice on the 2nd of August, I believe it was, that the county needed us to update the amendment to the CDBG, which is the
Oh.
Community Development Block Grant.
8B.
Am I the wrong one?
Yep, because that's 9B. Let's go up to 8B. So this is on the ordinance
Oh, okay.
regulating parades, special events, temporary
Okay.
closure.
All right. So what I was just going to kick off with this, Mr. Johnson wrote this one, but we know it's there's some unresolved questions that we wanted to put in front of you. So we now recognize it may not be ready for approval today, but given that the event that kind of started this ball rolling is coming soon, we wanted to put it in front of you to have those discussions, so.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Johnson, do you have anything else to add before we,
No, Madam
Look for
Mayor,
questions?
I did talk to the mayor earlier today, and the mayor had some suggestions, so I put those emails in front of you. So that's the email on the dais that I placed. And the email talks about replacing a section in, I believe it's section 7.
correct?
Which is on the bottom of page 35 of the packet number, page 35, for long-term events.
So if do you want me to take it from here, or?
Yes,
Okay.
I don't have anything else to add unless people have questions.
All right, thank you. So the recommendation to make a change to section 7 came from the conversation that we had at the Miracle of Christmas meeting about 2 or 3 weeks ago. and recognized that there was a couple of things that need to be separated out. First of all, a homeowners association and neighborhood association are completely, totally different animals. So the first line of the recommended replacement says, if the event is within the boundaries of an established homeowners association, HOA, proof of approval shall be included with the application, period. So if you don't live in an HOA, it doesn't apply to you. If you do, you're probably going to get approval from your HOA. So that takes that completely out of everything else. Regarding neighborhood associations, the suggested swap out for the rest of that section is as follows. The applicant, not the home neighborhood association, the applicant shall include a plan for outreach to the affected properties and show at least 50% consent from the residents of those properties. If the event is in an area in which there is a recognized neighborhood association, it is recommended that the applicant include the neighborhood association in the outreach communications. If this is an annual event and no substantive changes are made, the applicant shall include a plan for outreach to the affected properties and for receiving comments for residents. So you have a copy in front of you. This is simplifies what was published, and it is a change, but the idea is to clarify what a homeowners association is and what it's not, and the role for a neighborhood association that where it exists relative to a large event being planned by people in a neighborhood. So I'm trying to think beyond the miracle of Christmas itself more holistically, thinking of if my neighbor and I want to do something that will be for a whole weekend, a 3-day weekend, and it's going to affect 4 blocks of my neighborhood, I need to go ahead and consult with all of those neighbors. I have to prove that I did. I need to also prove that I got some sort of feedback, either something on a petition or something that demonstrates that people received it and are okay with it, because it's going to disturb their lives for 3 days. And since I live in West Keizer, I would reach out to the West Keizer Neighborhood Association to also ask them to put this out into the network for additional comment and feedback. So that's an example of what I had in mind as I was thinking through this, so that you have the event, and then you have the opportunity for neighborhood associations to be asked and that networking to be used. So I will pause there. I know it's a big change, and if we're not ready for it tonight, we can table this to our next meeting, but to Mr. Brown's point, fall is coming. Questions or comments on what I will be bringing forward as a substitution for Section 7? Council President Starr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple clarifying questions on the proposed verbiage. Do we need to define affected properties? Because, it's one thing to be on a direct, and I'm thinking of, let's pretend, for example, that the McNary Estates yard sale did not occur in a homeowners association, but something of that magnitude, right? And so you have homes all along in a development, and people are driving in. One person could interpret affected properties to mean only the homes on the route of the yard sale, or I think people could interpret that to mean all of the homes in the area of the neighborhood garage sale because of the traffic implications and the traffic impact. So recognizing that there's 2 distinct ways to interpret that, I would encourage us to define or clarify that. And then my second question is the statement that says it is recommended that the applicant include the neighborhood association. Just coming from my background, we could make 10 recommendations in a court report and nothing would be adhered to, followed, ordered, or whatever. So I can recommend it, but if it's not required, one of the parties doesn't have to do it. So I would suggest that we clarify the term recommended, because we can recommend it, but it doesn't have to happen.
So I have a comment on that. The applicant has no authority over the neighborhood association. The city does. So at some point, if we want to direct neighborhood associations that if they receive an application, that part of their duties and responsibilities, which do not currently exist under the current recognition, that we could direct them that they shall respond. At this point, we don't have that authority because we didn't bake it into the neighborhood association ordinance, which is in the process of being updated. So let's put a pin in that. But as this currently stands, the applicant will have no authority to direct the neighborhood association. So we're caught between a rock and a hard place in this, and that's why I put recommended at this point. I'm not sure that we can resolve this until we get the updated neighborhood association ordinance in place, where we can direct that neighborhood associations as part of their job to respond to such requests for participation in outreach for large events. Does that make sense?
Well, just to clarify though, Madam Mayor, it is recommended that the applicant include the neighborhood association in the outreach communications. So I could coordinate a parade in my neighborhood and you can recommend that I have a parade, that I include the neighborhood association, but I don't have to do it. So I could say, I don't care what the neighborhood association has to say.
I see where you're going. So we can direct that the applicant shall reach out to the neighborhood association, but we can't require that the neighborhood association respond at this point. And that's part of a conversation we're gonna have with the neighborhood associations. 1, 2, 3 are present here tonight. So we can have that conversation as a follow-up to our work session last week. Does this work at this point? So I do like that the applicant go ahead and reach out, and then we can work on the other side, working with the neighborhood associations on the appropriate language on the receiving end. Does that make sense? Because at this point, we can't make them. We know you guys are good at it, but we can't make it. Council, I'll make sure we're good. Do you have a recommendation on the language? And then we'll go to you.
We're good for now. I need to ponder.
Okay, so take out, it is recommended the applicant shall include in the outreach and communications. But we aren't requiring that they report back. If the neighborhood association says, I'm too busy, don't want to do it, we will not hold that against the applicant at this point because we can't. It's not fair.
Well, so then are we going to require, if the neighborhood association says, no, thank you, I'm too busy, I'm not going to do it, are we going to ask the applicant to do that outreach if it impacts an entire neighborhood, whether it's on the route or it has to do with traffic?
So going up to the top, what you talked about with outreach to the affected properties, and we might suggest looking at within the geographic boundaries of the event. So that would be inclusive of all the properties.
But what if the property isn't on the route and the
Well, the whole-
property's still impacted?
If you go far enough with the Miracle of Christmas, you're all the way back to I-5.
Stranger things have happened in Keizer.
So I'm going to pause on that one. Councilor Husband.
It's a healthy debate that we're having, Madam Mayor, so I think that it's good that we're putting this forward to the point about informing the neighborhood associations. It would seem unsporting, or at least gauche, if, say, a neighborhood association head got an email at 11 p.m. on a Saturday to say, hey, we're doing this event, and then that was used as proof of indication whether or not that email was even seen at the time or ended up in a spam folder or something. So to the point, it would be nice to strengthen that language with the neighborhood associations, which we obviously can't do here. But, yeah, so and Council President Starr, I think I see generally where you're going. I do have a little bit of concern with the outreach threshold because we have the no solicitor sign concern, among other things. Like you're talking about the geographic reach. Are there any other points of concern that you have as you're pondering on this? Because
No, I just want to make sure that we have a mechanism in place so that there is an expectation of an applicant that they will seek feedback and input on a potential change in a planned route, so that I think that I think we need to tighten up the language that would ensure that the applicant seeks to communicate in some form, whether that's email, whether that's social media, a post on their neighborhood association Facebook page, or they ask the neighborhood association to share this information, that there's some attempt at communication to neighbors in an impacted vicinity, whether they're on the route or not, because it's going to impact them. Like say cars are blocking and somebody can't get into their driveway, or there's just any number of possibilities. And I think that there should be some onus on the applicant to ensure that outreach, if there isn't a neighborhood association.
Well, and even if there is, the way I am recommending that it be written, it is on the applicant. To include it says, shall include a plan for outreach. And I like the idea of including within the geographic boundaries of the event to the affected properties and show at least 50% consent from the residents of those properties.
Well, that goes back to my clarification of define affected property, because we're all going to define it differently. There's two ways we can define affected property. Whether my garage sale route, it's going to affect more than just the properties that are participating in the progressive traffic to yard sales or the progressive dinner or whatever you want to call it. So I think I'm just saying I've seen it happen a number of times in situations where we didn't have language defined, we didn't define what we were meaning, and there were loopholes. And so I think if their potential loopholes are defined now, why wouldn't we clarify them now?
Okay, so my recommendation is going to be within the geographic boundaries of the event. And so that means let's go back to the McNary garage sale. If you've got a garage sale, and my mom never did, and she was not a fan of that event. But, living in McNary is part of life. And so she was an affected property. She was aware it was going to happen, and she just planned her day around it. But again, if it was going to be a 3-day garage sale event and so forth, we would have a higher, and assuming not a homeowners association, we would assume a higher level of outreach and planning for that event. I know we're all talking around it, but what we're talking about also is, the whole geographic area of an event, because you have traffic coming in, traffic going out, and defining that boundary. Part of that onus, in my humble opinion, is going to be on the applicant. If the city staff and ultimately the city manager believes that the applicant has been incomplete in assessing the scope of impact, the city manager has the discretion to send it back to the applicant saying, no, this is not reasonable, and send it back for amendment for the outreach, making sure that it is as comprehensive as possible. So there is going to be some art to this. I don't think that we're going to be able to drill it down that firmly at this point, and I don't know that we ever will. I think there's going to be some art to it. personally. So, Councilor Cross.
So I would, thank you, Madam Mayor. I would agree with Council President Starr. I think the less poking holes, the more transparent it is for everyone. So if I read this and Kyle reads this, we read it the same way. Because outreach to me is blowing up my phone, but outreach to Kyle could just be talking to me. Like, it's completely two different things. So anything we can poke holes in, I don't think should be in there. That's just my opinion on that. But I know we're finishing up your recommendations, but I do have a lot more questions for Shannon.
Okay, so you've got some other sections, but on section 7, and again, it's going to be up to the applicant to include, and this was on the original as well as the current one, the plan for outreach. So the applicant has to show what that outreach is going to look like. You know, I'm going to use next door flyers, yard signs, and a reader board. So the applicant can put that plan together. That's part of the application. Not only what they did, but then what are the results? Did they get, you know, the notification out to the affected geographic area? And did they get concurrence? Understanding that there are some events that have happened every year, Miracle of Christmas, the yard sales, things like that. Just ongoing communications is something that we've heard a lot about. We discussed it 3 weeks ago regarding the Miracle of Christmas. Just making sure, because people move in. People don't know. So again, that outreach, it's not a wholesale redo because this is ongoing. But the communication showed that the applicant did, for this year's event, did reach out to people, let them know what was happening. So if you have new people in the neighborhood, people weren't there last year, just so they are informed as well. So I think that is a piece that's going to be important for ongoing continuity and communication. So that's that last line in that paragraph for recommended replacement. It says, if this is an annual event with no substantive changes are made, the applicant shall include a plan for outreach to the affected properties, same as above, and for receiving comments from residents. And then that will be part of the application. Councilor Reed. And no, I'm sorry, I skipped you, Councilor Husband.
I'll defer to Councilor Reed first. She can go.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I do appreciate too that, you know, we're not solving, every single anticipated problem that could come up with this, and just because we can't solve all those problems just because of the nature of people, it doesn't mean we can't do something that makes it better than it has been. So I kind of wanted to throw that out there. And then with that, I'm looking here at the show at least 50% consent from the residents of the properties. Well, I'm thinking of all the people with no soliciting signs or people that don't look at social media. So, it's highly possible that not even 50% of the residents affected get the message, much less approve it. So perhaps we could change that, say at least 50% consent of those residents of those properties who responded, or something along those lines.
I will add that as a point for us to discuss. 50% of respondents. I know silence implies assent until something happens and you go, wait, I didn't.
Usually, that's how it goes.
Yeah, that's when they come down here going, I didn't know about it. It's like, sorry. Councilor Husband. I'm not trying to make fun of that. We had people come down here upset that they didn't know something, but then inform us that they don't take the paper, they're not on social media, they don't watch the news, and they don't watch city council, and they didn't know. Councilor Husband.
I mean, I agree, Madam Mayor, and I agree with Councilor Reed too. It is maybe one of our most persistent challenges is being able to inform people as generally as possible, given that people are not consuming information the way that we necessarily think they are, or in some cases, they're not even consuming information at all, especially community information, which we are, I would say, finding in increasing numbers as time goes on and as we keep returning to these conversations. minor digression, kind of trying to frame the problem here. So this is a bit for the gallery and the TV audience. I think we're really harping on three things with this type of resolution, or with this type of ordinance here, that being traffic, light, and noise. Miracle Christmas is a decent example because that's gonna, light up the streets all the way around, and neighbors are gonna see it from a couple blocks away. But this is where Gubser Neighborhood Association's honed it in, and it's a pan neighborhood outreach at this point. Right, Patty? I'm not misrepresenting too hard. Just this is a major one, and so as time's gone on, the outreach has been greater and greater, and now obviously the event's gone on more often and more often. People know what's coming, and they have an idea of how bright to expect the Christmas lights to be. But some people may not necessarily for a first-time event. There may be live music or artificial noise or something that comes through. Fireworks would obviously be a big one, not necessarily inherent to this ordinance, but certainly something that has come up in the past. I think that when we're looking for some of these applications, though, we really want to harp on those three elements to make sure that we understand just how much of the environment your event is going to take up space within. Not necessarily the physical footprint of the neighborhood. I think we're covering that pretty well here, but also just are you blaring loud music that we should be aware of and that neighbors might want to know, especially if it could go into the evening, something of that nature.
So the time, manner, and place.
Yes, so thank you, Mayor.
Okay.
Just trying to right size that and put that out there for the consideration of everyone.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, the only other thing I had on this memo, and this is just a small correction to section 13. This is on the bottom of page 38 of the packet, page 8 of the ordinance. There was a term missing on line 18, where it says signage for parade, special event, or block party must comply with current Keizer sign regulations unless allowed by city council. Unless what is allowed. So I would like to change that to unless an exception to the sign code is approved by city council. So that's on there, because and we do this for Keizer Fest and other events, if they want to allow for special signage, then we have to bring that as part of the application. So that's the only change there that I'm recommending to clarify. Council President Starr.
This could be a matter of potato, but Keizer sign regulations, but your note says sign code. Potato, or?
Which is the proper term, Mr. Witham?
I would probably defer to our city attorney, but it's ordinance 98-389 technically. But I was just kind of sidebarring. I think that our city councilor may need to come up with a little different language, because what we do currently in the sign, we call it the sign code affectionately. It is technically section 2.308 of the Keizer Development Code. But there's actual language in that code that allows by resolution for a special event of significant city importance that the council can approve any manner and type of signs for that specific event. Otherwise, there is no way to just make an exception to things in our development code unless you go through a formal variance process, which we would not want to do for Iris Festival every year or for something else. So,
Mr. Johnson?
Yeah. Shane is correct. We don't usually need to do this because the permit, there's nothing, they don't ask for any variances from the sign regulations. I mean, the sign regulations don't prohibit, they don't put up a big sign is what I'm getting at. It's not like the parade, they put us up big signs. They decorate their houses, which is not considered a sign. So we don't really have to vary that. Now, if they did, then and if you want to allow that, we'd have to that would be a little difficult because we'd have to actually open up the sign code, so. So my
We all
original
love opening the
language,
sign code, as you can tell.
yeah, we don't want to do
Said
that.
no one ever.
But I would assume the council's not looking to actually adopt a final ordinance tonight.
No.
So I will look into that further and
Okay.
get back to you the next
All
time we
right,
take
so
this
this
matter.
is pending. Thank you. good point. Actually, Counselor Cross is next.
Yep.
Okay, Counselor Cross, go.
Okay, I'll try to be brief. So thank you for all the hard work. This is great. We got to get it done. I just want to, I think that we just got to tweak it. And I did find it super helpful. Mr. Brown gave me the last ordinances. That was helpful, and I think it's helpful to have that in the packet, because what are we changing if I don't know? And it was from 2000. What does it look like? So he actually gave me the 1991 and the 2000. That's helpful because at least we know what we're comparing it to. And then I looked up some other cities where I think we are vague. It kind of goes with what does outreach look like? Other cities, for the violations, special events, they define what special events are. Whatever we decide, if that's 75 people, it's 100 people. But it doesn't define what that special event is, like what that bottom is. They even have, if you are having defined a special event, you could get, without a permit, you could get a violation fee of whatever it is. I'll leave that for all of you to chew on. I noticed on section 6, the personnel costs, it says applicant shall pay the estimated amount of overtime hours, including benefits for each city personnel who are required by the city to work overtime hours or other, but it doesn't say anything about maybe letting that event person know. And we know most of the events in town are community events. So if they're barely breaking even or have $10 left in the bank, then we're going to hit them with some overtime. I thought that the city of McMinnville did a very good job because they have that clause in there if the police department is needed, but it says the city of McMinnville may not provide services during overtime hours unless reimbursed by certified check at least 1 week advance, knowing that, hey, this is going. So it just, as far as the Keizer community person that's holding the event, it gives them, hey, they have the option to have security or whatnot and pay that big overtime fee. I talked to Adam, section 8, permit approval. That went from, most are 45 days, so I'm not sure why it's 60 days. I think on the previous one it was 25 to 45. So in 1990, or the first one went to 25 days, and then it went to 45 days, and now we're going to 60 days, plus the 30 days if we deny it. So it's actually 90 days. So I think, in my opinion, it should be, I don't know where we got the 45 day, but 45 day. And then my last thing is the insurance. It says, so on our permit application, it says 500,000. This went to $1 million. There are quite a few cities, and I mean, I'll let Shannon and Adam do the work, that include a extra insurance amount for the city of McMinnville, its elected and appointed officials, officers, agents, employees, and volunteers, and additional insured. So it seems like the going city insurance would be $2 million, and it makes sense to me from 500,000. So yeah, there you go.
2 million or 1 million?
2 million is what our surround, like Silverton, McMinnville, Salem. So $1 million for the employees, elected officials, but
As additional insured?
well, I would again, let's see what that, I know that if you get a day, you can get a day special event for $1 million for 150. So I don't know what that looks like, but I think that it's worth looking into that 500,000 versus $1 million or two. More homework.
Yeah. So insurance for, just so I'm really clear, insurance for the city as additional insured, and then for the event itself.
I mean, you all can define on it. Maybe it's a multi-day event. I don't know what it is. But I think the clearer we are on whatever resolution or ordinance we come up with, it's very easy that no matter who's reading it, we'll see it the same way.
I like it. Fantastic.
There you go.
Thank you very much. Councilor Husband, you had a comment, question?
Counselor Cross mentioned it, but yeah, the 60, 45 day, 30 day discretion did stand out to me as well, and I think we should act on that. So thank you, Sarai. I appreciate you.
All right. Okay. So those are recommended changes and so forth. And Mr. Johnson said it, we have enough changes that this is going to have to come back for consideration at our first meeting in September. Correct, Mr. Johnson?
Correct. And I did have one follow-up, unless there's going to be a motion. What was the final direction on the affected area? Wasn't quite clear on that part.
Well,
Because
No, it's how we
I don't need exact verbiage, but I think Council President Starr's point was, should the effective area which you're trying to get consent from include only, and let's use this example with the Miracle of Lights, only the route, or should it include the entire neighborhood, for example? And should you have something, and we can kind of try to write a definition that is directly affected or just affected, I think is kind of where you're
Right.
going.
And
So
I
I
think-
kind of need direction on that to know which direction you'd like me to write it.
Counselor Duran,
So I lived in Gubzer neighborhood for 25 years, and
you can speak to this.
yes, so, and I
So
was
can
not
I.
on the lights route, as you were on the lights
Yes,
route, but
I
I was
was.
not. I was a block off. So it didn't necessarily affect me directly, and I knew how to get around it myself for when traffic was bad. But when I had people coming to my house, guests, they did not know how to get around it. And at times, it gets congested in the neighborhood. So I would say, even though I was a block off, I was affected. So that's where it needs to be defined. I would have appreciated at the time to be notified, but I was not directly involved. So that's just my comment on that. It could be, I mean, it could be the whole neighborhood that directly has, input. I would hate to make that a rule, but I would also hate to not allow somebody that is out of the direct affected area to not have a say.
So I want to clarify, and then I'll go to Counselor Reed, because you used two different terms. One was notified, and the other one was to have a say. Those are two different things. So as a property owner, not directly on the route, because clearly every residence on the route needs to be notified. There's no question about that, and actually to be consulted. As one that was off of there, what do you think is what's fair? To be part of the decision-making in setting the route, or to ensure that all of the affected, because you were indirectly affected, be notified in some time, manner, and place?
That one, I don't necessarily want to make a commitment on that myself right now, but I wanted to be part of the discussion, because I kind of have mixed feelings on both of it, because I was, like I said, it didn't bother me. I enjoyed having the traffic, but once it got backed up to where I couldn't go around it, I was definitely annoyed. And at times, it got so bad that it was backed up to the freeway, and you couldn't get around it. And that does affect even people outside of the neighborhood. So it just needs to be something that we talk about, or maybe we find a better way to route things into the neighborhood. So.
So I'm going to go to Counselor Reed, and then Patty, you've been very, very patient. Thank you, because I wanted you to hear this conversation, because it probably addresses a number of things that you and your team have been discussing as well. So with that, Counselor Reed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just real quickly, Patty, how many neighbors are in the neighborhood association?
So press pause just a sec, because Patty's not at the microphone.
Okay.
So that's a question we're going to need to have her address
Okay.
when she comes up here.
Well,
Yeah.
so my whole point with this is, let's look at this from a practical perspective. I mean, there are thousands of, arguably thousands of houses in that neighborhood. If we if we required notification, then, and probably maybe a third of them might be on the route. If we required a notification and then 50% of the respondents, it's possible that the people who are most affected on the route kind of get waylaid by the broader requirement for outreach. Does that make sense? So if we keep it at directly affected in terms of this requirement, yes, the more information we can get out to the greater neighborhood, the better. But just in terms of what we're requiring here, it seems to me to make the most sense to keep it focused on the directly affected. Because otherwise, the directly affected are not going to have as much power if that's diluted, if we are looking at the whole neighborhood.
So you're thinking from start to finish of this essentially up like a parade or some sort of flow of traffic, an event that affects a certain geographic space, understanding that there will be people who are neighbors too and need to be notified at some point that this is coming down, it's going to affect their lives, but start to finish. So when you enter McNary or enter Gubser, there's the signs where you enter and there's signs where you end and everything in between.
And I think too, a sort of multi-tiered consent versus informed kind of a situation might be helpful. We need to get consent from these people, but everybody should be informed. So I think that double-tiered way of perspective would be a useful way of looking at it too.
So consent of the participants and then the notification
of the geographical area.
Of the geographic area.
Madam Mayor, I don't think it's just the participants though, because not every house on the route participates. So I think you need to be careful on that, on how the verbiage that we use.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Just to clarify, participation participation in whether it's the McNary Estates garage sale or the Miracle of Lights, everybody on that route is a participant, even if they're not decorating or even if they're not garage sailing, they're still a participant by virtue of the fact that they're on the route. So we could look at it that way as well. I don't know if we need to clarify that or get in that.
Well, and I think we are, as people are listening to this conversation, why this has been a challenging conversation for Gubser, and then reading back to the wonderful information that we got from, Shani Starr got from former City Councilor Jackie Moyer, who always has kept meticulous records and provided the history. 30 years ago, Gubser and the neighborhood had the same conversation. It's almost lock, stock, and barrel. I was reading the materials from that going, wow, this is back to the future. And so everybody was grappling with these same issues back then as well. So I really appreciate everybody leaning in to find the best ways to communicate, to codify, and to let great events like this happen, and make sure that everybody's included. With council's concurrence, let's bring Patty Tischer from the Greater Gubser Neighborhood Association, and someone who's been working very hard and living in the neighborhood for many years. Part of the team for moving forward. Thank you so much, Patty, for being here tonight.
No problem. For the record, do you want me to identify?
Go ahead.
Okay. So my name is Patty Tischer, and I'm a resident of Keizer for about the past 19 years, and I'm also the president of the Greater Gubser Neighborhood Association. So being a resident of Keizer, when we bought our house in the Gubser neighborhood, our realtor said, "Oh, you're so lucky. Your address is not on the Christmas light route anymore." That was the prior year that they had changed the route. So even though we weren't on the route, and it really wasn't even an issue, for us one way or the other at the time. And, but as Kyle said, you're affected by the traffic. You find a way to go the opposite direction to get in and out during that time. If you have guests coming, you say, oh, I gotta let you know, we're on the route, so this is how you get into our house. So it is a challenge, but it's fun. It's a great community event. Everybody loves it for the most part. And a couple things that I wasn't actually planning on being here in person. I was gonna watch online, but then when I started reading the packet for tonight, I thought, I better see what's going on. So,
Were it only that others in the community shared your desire to come to these meetings, Patty.
So a couple things, in comments, with the signs, would the snow cops go along with the ordinance for the signage? And then also the signs that the city put up, there's one that comes, I think it's on Lock Haven by 14th, right before, that directs people to 14th, and then also exiting on Manzanita towards River Road. With those signs, because there was some discussion regarding that section, so that was just my comment to bring up about signage with section 13.
We would consider those government signs, and they're exempt, so.
Okay, gotcha.
No required special permission for
The
those.
snow cops are now government signs. They are now on public poles.
Pardon?
They are now going on
Right.
brackets on the poles.
Yeah.
So would those also be considered government signs?
Yes.
There we go.
Well,
Check the
and
box.
that
And?
was a change that was gonna be made. I don't know that that's actually been made. I thought it was the talk that they were,
It really doesn't matter. They were in the past also, because they're
Okay.
considered directional signs, basically.
Okay.
So, yeah, we don't see those as being necessary to be exempt, because they're allowed under an exemption in the sign code now.
okay, gotcha. Okay, so that was my question about that. And,
Good question.
I had a question, section 4, the permit application with the days as far as written application, no less than 90 days. So there was different time frames in here. There was a 90-day, there was a 60-day, there was a 45-day. And so if we're like talking for this year, we're kind of getting into crunching time. 90 days would be like September 1.
That's a little bit of, yeah.
So previously, I thought it was 60 days, which would have put it October 1. So that, and there's different sections where it talks about different times. So I know, so if you guys are gonna be reviewing and making changes, those are just things I wanted to point out too, that I had questions regarding timeframes. So putting that into consideration. And then, okay, so then also on the section 7, regarding the process, I had a concern where the neighborhood association would have responsibility for being involved with the outreach. So that's just something that I wanted to talk about, that I feel very strongly that the event organizers, okay, so as long as we're on that, so,
And that was, if I may interrupt, that was part of the conversation we were having about swapping out section 7 to make it clear that outreach and communications is the responsibility, and the plan and the results is the responsibility of the applicant.
okay.
Neighborhood association is a great partner when one exists, but it is the responsibility of the event
Okay.
organizer.
Well, and
whatever
I
that
was
is.
following, and some of that, and I didn't know if my draft is like a rough, and there was like another version of it that I didn't have some of this, so, okay.
This is a work in progress.
Okay, well, that's what I was thinking, but I just wanted to be sure that we were good. Let's see. I think that's the main thing, and the timeframes, was a question that I had, and then, one of the things too, as far as consent from the affected neighbors and neighbors involved versus informed, I'm just wondering if, because, come on, let's talk, we're referring to the miracle of Christmas, and then also more broad, that if there's any other event in the future, I get that, but, I'm just wondering if there's something somehow that we could massage into it that the event grandfathered, if it's an event that has occurred previously for so many years prior, that we could grandfather something in. I don't know, exactly, because as far as consent, back to Councilor Reed's question, we have over 3,000 houses in the Greater Gupser Neighborhood Association. So if we had to, or even the event organizers, if they even had to go have outreach door to door to those people, you do have many of them that no soliciting. We can post out on social media, have the newspaper help us with outreach, the Nextdoor online forum, some of those, but to actually get their consent from 50% of the people, that's gonna be, yeah.
So to
I read your lips, sir.
So to Councilor Reed's point, 50% consent of those who respond is what she was suggesting. But again, part of the applicant job is to show the plan. What did you do? We did Nextdoor, we did the yard signs, which we have found to be extraordinarily effective, with a QR code maybe. We did flyers for those who permitted it, and we passed out X many. And then show the map of the scope of the outreach. And then it'll be up to the city manager to determine if it was comprehensive enough, or if we want further outreach, a little bit broader. For ongoing, I appreciate the desire for grandfathering, but I think that it's really important, especially with the changes that have happened this year. If there is no change in the route, understand about the consent, but the outreach plan will still need to happen. So reaching out to the affected area, that will have to be in the application as well, that yes, this is the information about it, what is happening, when it's happening, how it's happening. And then the opportunity, and I threw this in there based on our conversation 3 weeks ago, and the plan for receiving comments from residents. That communication, that is something that has not happened really well, but 10 years ago when former Councilor Taylor and Mr. Griffin were doing it, they were really easy to get a hold of. And I thought that was a fantastic model. And then when it started up in 1994, the information that we all received who are working on this, it showed, here's all the people that reach, here's our phone numbers, here's where we live, you can come talk to me, you can phone me, you can text me, you can whatever. So that sort of communications setup, that is the intent of that change that I'm hoping that we can put in there, that if it's an ongoing, that it have the opportunity for dialogue with the event organizer. So we are talking about Miracle of Christmas, but then I have, in my head, I keep going, what if, and like we talked about the mythological garage sale in a non-HOA area. Trying to separate that out enough to look at it from a different point of view. Does that make sense? So there's some of that going on, at least in my head, trying to turn it upside down and make sure that it works from all those different angles.
Right.
So does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And one of the things that I know how we all know how this came about because there was a change last season and notification wasn't timely and there wasn't good due diligence in communicating with the people affected. So I guess some wordage, and I guess using the word grandfathered, because this is an event that has been going on for 40 years, and for the last 10 years, the route has been the same, and if there's some verbiage that as long as the route remains the same as it had in the past, say, 5 years, that there would be, you know, this, and this, as opposed to if it's being changed, then this more depth outreach needs to be made. So that's one of the things, on the current route for Miracle of Lights, there are approximately 325 houses.
Okay.
And,
Does that include from, God, I'm getting tired.
14th,
From 14th and Lock Haven to the exit at
Manzanita.
The
And
entire.
then the whole loop
thing.
and around Gubser and.
Okay.
Yeah. And one of the things, we're just a block off the route, and like Counselor Duran said that he was a block off the route as well. One of the things that I would have appreciated is even just getting that notice. So even to go a block further to notify people when their little flyer goes out that, hey, this is what's happening. Because from my knowledge, every house that was on the route would probably about October or so get a little flyer that said, this is what's happening and these are the dates of it and such. And so it would have been just a courtesy, I think, to just maybe go a block further, even though you're not on the route, just to say, hey, you know, just as a reminder, because it's not, I mean, if you've been in the neighborhood, you know what's happening.
Unless you just moved there.
Exactly.
And your realtor didn't let you know.
Yes, so anyway.
So I like that. And that would be, again, in the applicant, the application, the plan for a recurring event, because you still have to do an application every year. The application would then indicate that there are no substantive changes, and here's the plan for outreach to the affected properties, and here's how the residents can communicate with the event organizer. So that give and take, and then the applicant, I'm going to say you, the applicant would indicate the scope of that and go, if this is the route, if you will, and we're going to go this much farther in order to be inclusive, that would then be in the application. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think so.
Council President Starr has a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's not really a question, it's more adding to my list of words to define and be clear on, and that would be substantive changes, because what might be substantive to Counselor Cross might not be substantive to me and vice versa. So that's another one to add to the list.
Okay, circling that. All right. Counselor Husband has a question for you?
Not necessarily, just a response to Council President Starr on substantive changes. Seems like maybe the most fair thing would be any sort of geographic expansion, because parade routes are easy, but even things like block parties and other neighborhood events all seem to have pretty well-defined physical boundaries of what the event is. People can say that it's between, you know, these houses on this street to these houses on that street, or this section of a particular street, or this cul-de-sac. So that may ultimately be the solution for our problem.
Thank you for your feedback, but I still add it to the list. I think it can still be interpreted differently by people.
Sure.
And if I may, and I'll go to Councilor Reed, and bounce this off of you, Patty, for looking at changes, it'd be time, manner, and place. You know, if you're going to change the times, the manner, or place of an event. Place being either if it was a parade, a route, a block party, the change of the space.
Or the tent is, or.
yeah, things like that. So I think that time, manner, and place would be objective terms that we could use in this conversation for a parade, an event, et cetera, if that makes sense. I'm going to go to Councilor Reed, sorry, and then I'll come down to you. Councilor Reed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I'm sorry, can I press pause?
Okay.
Patty, did that,
I think so, yeah.
How did that feel?
There was just some confusion on my part from some of the discussion, and I wasn't sure if I had the correct ordinance. And like Counselor Cross, the previous ordinances, I was referring back to those as well too, and comparing them to what the new verbiage and some of the verbiage, and just to reiterate some of those points, so.
all right, I'm going to go Councilor Reed then.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So two things. First of all, in the packet, it says under the recommendation that staff recommends the council allow for public comment on the fee. So I just kind of wanted to make sure that we cover that in this conversation as far as what that means. And I'm looking at the financial application fee of $50. Anyway, so I just wanted to throw that out there. Is that something we have to get public feedback on, and is
Not tonight.
Right. Thank you for bringing that up, Councilor Reed. So state law does not require a public hearing for fees. We often do have a public hearing, it's not required, but there is a state statute that says anytime you are increasing a fee, you have to allow for public comment. And so what the mayor typically does, and we've had this usually in connection with budgets, is there any discussion, does anyone want to make a comment on the fee?
Right.
So that's the reason that line is in there.
okay. Okay. And then my other question is, given the fact that this is not going to be voted on officially, do we have, what does poor Patty do in terms of her application? So just kind of
Not necessarily my application.
No, yeah, I mean in general,
No.
but yeah.
For the event organizer. and-
Yes.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Johnson.
With regard to the timeframes, I think the city manager and staff will discuss the timeframes. I think people have pointed out a couple of problems. I will point out the language there about the 90 days. This is unless waived by the city manager. So I think that we would waive that 90-day period. The reason it went from 60 to 90 days is adding up the other days in terms of possible appeals and the deadlines and all of that. It became too tight to be able to fit within the 60 days. So I'm not sure we would look at changing the 90 days, but we might make some clarifications there with regard to some of the other timeframes. And again, the city manager can waive that 90-day requirement, which is probably what will happen.
So the short version is, we have the discussion, and since the planning for this event is part of this conversation and helping us collectively create this process going forward, that would make a lot of sense to work collaboratively on this. Does anybody disagree? So this is definitely a collaborative process. Okay. So anything else that you want to make sure that we don't miss in this conversation about the ordinance at this point?
I don't think so. I
Okay.
think you've all done a great job of dissecting things, and just, I wanted some clarification on a couple of things too, and then put my input, so, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Council, additional input regarding questions, comments, and so forth for the next iteration going forward? Hopefully the final iteration. Councilor Cross. I did
Thank
promise
you,
to-
Madam Mayor. I just hope we do address in some way that overtime section
Right.
6. Yeah, because I would be interested to know, have we ever charged that to anyone? And, and do we pick and choose, and how
Right.
exactly is that enforced? So I think that the more transparent and fair we are, the better.
Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, I wasn't sure what we wanted to address to change that, though. The answer to your question is, I am not aware that we have charged that for any event. It's possible that we have. It's typically waived.
They come in,
They come in and they'll ask for a waiver of that. And it also does allow, I think, for a fair amount of discretion, the city manager too. So let me double check. I think that I just saw that. Personnel costs, as determined by the city manager will be required to perform duties, shall pay an amount equal to. No, that's actually discretion. Maybe, the discretion is actually whether we use personnel, not whether we're not those. So if the discretion is really not in the city manager at all in terms of the fees. So the way it reads now, they would have to get a waiver from the council on that. And that's what we was kind of the fail-safe there.
Well,
If we want
yeah.
to look at something different, I need direction from council on how you want to do that.
Well-
You can't just absorb the costs.
I wouldn't even say that necessarily. I just, by looking at other ways that other cities have done this, like in just, for example, the McMinnville, it says that, many community events may be required to use the city of McMinnville's police department, but if they do, they're not going to get charged that overtime, and they have they can also get their own security. I just want to make sure that we don't have a group that maybe is trying to do this amazing community event, and then all of a sudden they're on the hook for $500. And if we as a council want to do that, are we enforcing it, and how do you enforce it? Is it fair?
Okay, I was rereading that line on line 8. Applicant shall pay the city an amount equal to the employee's compensation. And if I understand the way this is written correctly, which it includes the full cost of that employee's compensation, who are required by the city to work overtime hours. Yeah, I can see where this feels confusing to me as well. I think what we're trying to get at, and I'm looking at Mr. Brown, we're trying to get at if this event, if the application for an event requires city staff, and because of the time, manner, and place, the personnel involved would be working overtime?
Yeah.
Mr. Okay, you got it.
I think there's a word missing, or
Yeah.
or off. I think the concept is if it's so major it requires overtime hours, which means additional expense that we wouldn't ordinarily incur. So if you have a small event and you have patrol officers on duty, they're not getting paid overtime, they say, hey, go over to the Miracle Christmas and do something there. There's no extra cost to the city. But if it's a big enough event where we have to bring in overtime, then that's an expense that is due solely to that event. And perhaps it would be appropriate, as a policy question for council to be reimbursed. The word that I'm looking at is on line 9, where it says to work overtime, required by the city to work overtime hours or other than regular shift, and it says or perform duties. I think that word should be to. Required by the city to work overtime hours or other than regular shift to perform the duties during that
Bingo.
result. And so the policy question now is more limited. Is it okay to charge if it's big enough that it requires overtime hours?
And
if you're okay with that.
That makes sense. I would just ask that there's somewhere in there that we don't stick somewhere that maybe they thought their event was 100 and then 300 showed up, that we're sticking them with a big bill.
Now, I think we're required to give them an idea what that amount's gonna be.
But not if we don't say it.
In advance.
Well, actually, it says that they have to do it ahead of time,
20
so
days in advance.
they have to do it 20 days in advance, so we would estimate that.
Okay,
Right.
gotcha.
So, yeah,
The only event, and I don't know if the chief can tell me off the top of his head, but the only event that I can think of is the parade events that we would have regularly, routinely use overtime hours for, and those are typically waived.
Madam Mayor, yes.
Chief?
That's budgeted for. The cop, we used to set out the snow cops.
Yeah.
So that may be some of what this is all about.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
1994, we now know, thanks to Jackie Moyer's, I have the history, I printed it off right here, but I was reading the memos year over year of the police department putting out the memos, okay, we're putting out the snow cops, okay, we're directing traffic. So the city was doing all of the work, for managing the event when there was a short time period in which there was a committee, and then going from year to year, it just vanished. I was looking through the papers going, there's nothing here. But the police department was continuing the service to the Gubser neighborhood area, and it seemed like there was no there. But they were doing it every year until it reached a point of the police department said, and the city manager at the time said, okay, enough. We got to sit down and figure out. And then the Gubser Neighborhood Association and the Christmas Lights Committee, I believe is what it was called, were co-formed. They worked together, but they were co-formed and they were actually separate. So that's what I learned from that great information that Council President Starr brought back from Jackie Moyer, former Councilor Moyer. So yeah, this is a little bit of back to the future, but to your point, Chief, yeah, the city was doing all the work and they finally said, okay, can you all figure this out? And they did. So, to Councilor Cross's question, we have the clarification for line 8. And then we want to make sure that, and I think really make it clear that the applicant shall be provided an estimate so they can decide if they want to amend their application. So it won't cost them that. So there has to be an opportunity for the applicant to respond and go, whoa, I didn't think of that. You know, they want to throw the biggest party in the world and then they get the bill of what this could possibly cost and go, I think I'll scale it down. So can we work on something in there that allows for the applicant to modify or reduce scope?
Madam Mayor, I think the example that Councilor Cross showed me today might be a good place to start.
Awesome.
From McMinnville.
Always happy to use materials from someone who's figured it out. Okay, so that's gonna be great feedback there. Anything else? Reed? Husband? Good? Star? Duran? Cross? We good? Mr. Johnson, any questions for us at this point?
I apologize, Madam Mayor. Where did we end up with the percentage? Was it 50% of the people who responded or not?
That's pretty much all we can, what we can control. So going back to our span of control, we can't control people who refuse to respond. Mm-hmm. The applicant cannot control, but they can control what they do, and that's what they have shown in their plan, but they can't make people respond. So 50% of respondents. Is anybody sideways with that? Okay.
50% of respondents are broadcast to.
No, 50% of people who actually respond when they are given the information, we are going to do X event. Are you okay with this? Here's the information. Yes, no. And people go, I'm not going to answer. Well, in this case, silence implies assent.
Okay.
No.
Yes, Councilor Cross.
Sorry, I do have one more question. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Are we putting somewhere in there how we are, because people will find loopholes, that's what they do. How, not you, Patty, though. That how we're communicating with them, whether it be social media, flyers, like, are we saying two different avenues? Are we just saying one avenue, you know?
No, we are putting the onus on the applicant.
Okay, so just communicate and they define what communicate is.
And they have to actually write it out in the application. It has to include what that outreach looked like. What did it include? Did it include yard signs? Did it include next door? Did it include what their outreach
Okay,
plan was?
I'm just kind of thinking out loud, like the poking holes, okay? Because communicate could be like, I'm standing on the street corner.
No, there has to be the applicant has to document how the outreach was conducted. And then it is up to the city manager to determine if that was comprehensive.
I would not want to be in a, we are I'm sorry, that we're asking for,
So do we make a list and say 2 of the 5 that needs to be done?
I'm sorry, Adam, I don't want to be in your shoes.
Well, and one of the things we've talked about is the range of high-tech and low-tech. If you only go out on one social media platform and half of your neighborhood is not on that platform, or half your neighborhood isn't even on social media, that's not appropriate. So, well, as you, I believe Councilor Cross and I talked about, or Councilor Starr and I talked about, high-tech and low-tech. You know, what does that mix look like? Is there a recommendation on to include but not limited to? Councilor Duran?
Well, what if we just put a list of the most common things and say, you know, pick 2 of the above. And if you can prove that you've done 2 of these, we're fine with that. Or 3. I mean, you know, we list the most common ones that people use. And if they pick the easy ones, that's on them. I mean, that's good on them, but just give them the ones that, you know, we would expect to be used, and then ask them to do however many we feel is the right mix of those, or 2 categories, and they pick one of each or something like that. Something that's defined.
Yeah, it needs to be defined because that's not fair to staff.
Or to the applicant, for that matter.
To put them in the position of having to decide what's acceptable or what's not acceptable. And then we're going to hear from people that said, you know, this decision was fair, but this one wasn't. And so clear, concise, and defined.
So if we can get a list of recommendations for types of outreach, and then to include but not limited to include at least a certain number, but not limited to, here's recommendations. And further, that it include both technology and non-technology, at least one each of technology and non-technology.
This every 5 years or so. Otherwise, that'll be totally irrelevant and look ridiculous. Because if we were looking at that level of detail at this, it would be ridiculous. So.
Yep, fair enough. Yep, we have to keep on updating. Well, we just looked over our neighborhood association ordinance from 1993, which had never even been amended. So, yep, some check-ins are a good idea. All right, Councilor Duran.
What if we make it that it's at the discretion of the city manager that he updates this? So we don't have to update it, but we ask him to do it as whatever the current avenues that are available, or something that just says, here, we expect you to keep up on this, whatever's the most current ways that are being used, but make it in the application, have it, and so that way the application can just be updated every few years, but the ordinance does not have to be.
Okay. Well, and I think that to the point of technology and so forth, we don't want to list platforms because platforms that we have now didn't exist 5 years ago and may not exist 5 years from now. But to say that we're going to use electronic and non-electronic means. Councilor Husband.
Agreed with your general point, Madam Mayor, that we are constantly shifting our communication platforms over time. I would submit that putting an event notice in the paper of record should be a solid baseline. That being the Keizer Times, I think it's reasonable to infer that could be a baseline requirement for communication.
I like the idea, but is the Keizer Times considered our paper of record, or is that the Statesman Journal?
The Keizer Times counts under state statute.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that because I've run into that with some other notifications where I had to use a different publication.
That's for most cases in terms of like public hearings. There's certain bidding requirements under state law, but that's not applicable to this discussion.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor President Starr.
This is my last request for a definition on this issue. Could we get a definition of solicitation? So you see on the doors, it says no soliciting. I've heard different definitions in my time of doing, whether it's canvassing or whether it's, Girl Scout cookies, whatever. So I know we talked about it at the, our work session last Monday, which was on neighborhood associations, but a definition of what soliciting means.
In connection with,
Outreach.
because I don't think this.
Outreach, like
there's no
going
sol-
around and putting
Oh, okay.
door
There's no
hangers.
solicitation discussion currently, though, unlike other definitions in there. So
Okay,
you're talking about
but-
addressing that issue?
But addressing, let's get a definition of the no soliciting, because I've heard people have talked about it. It's been mentioned tonight, it was mentioned Monday night. I've heard that canvassing doesn't apply, and no solicitation doesn't apply to canvassing. So I just would like us to have a solid working definition. Thank you.
I really am not sure what context that is, though, because unlike your other definitions that are already in there, I don't think there's a discussion of solicitation in there.
But Patty mentioned it today.
Right, but I mean, I guess
So I'm asking for that definition for people to understand what that, can we all work from the same definition?
you mean not as part of the ordinance?
I just want a definition, because if we're gonna say to Patty, I'm gonna
To the
use you.
event.
Sorry,
The applicant.
to the applicant, sorry, right? Applicant Patty.
Let's go generic.
It's 9:15, kind of,
We're taking a
right?
break here in a few
So
minutes.
the applicant wants to go put flyers on the doors. And that's what we're telling them to do, or they're picking that they're gonna do that. And they come back and say, we couldn't put out on the 562 houses that are subject to this random number. We couldn't put out flyers on their door hangers. On 362 of those 562 houses, because they had a no solicitation sign on their door. I'm asking for a definition so people understand, are they gonna get in trouble if they wanna do a door hanger and it says no solicitation? I think that's a fair ask for our neighborhood associations to understand what that means. And I think we heard it last Monday, and I heard Patty mention it today, so I'm asking for clarification.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? So this will come back in its new form in September. So that would be September 5th, I believe. Is that a possibility? And we will work collaboratively with the ongoing development of the event organization for the Miracle of Christmas. So for people who are watching going, oh my gosh, is this going to happen? Yes, we're talking. And we being a group of individuals and organizations to help this event once again evolve. It happened in '92. It can happen again this year. So fear not. With that, I would like to take a 5-minute break, and then we will resume our agenda on item 8C. We are in recess. Item 8C, operating businesses in parks and other public spaces. And this goes to, I didn't write it down. Who's got this one? Is it Mr. Johnson? Oh, I'm sorry, we need to start off with Counselor Duran.
I want to declare a potential or perceived conflict of interest. The nature of the conflict is that I have a relative that could have a pecuniary interest in the outcome of this matter. Since this is something that will potentially benefit a larger group, I will be participating in the discussion and vote on this matter.
Thank you very much. And with that, this will go to Mr. Johnston, I believe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And occasionally we have folks ask if they can operate some type of businesses in the park. Currently, the park regulations prohibit that unless there's a special contract issued. And we don't really have a program for that. If there's an event scheduled, of course, we do have, such as the events we've had at Keizer Rapids Park, for example. As part of that reservation permit, vendors are allowed to appear. The most likely one, of course, would be some sort of food truck or a food cart or something at the amphitheater, or, of course, in the last couple of years, the Keizer Fest. But again, that's part of the reservation of the park. To have something that's just a business by itself is something that we haven't allowed and don't have anything set up for them. But we have gotten some requests, and the issue, staff could come up with kind of physical and legal standards such as insurance requirements and placement, vision clearance and safety issues and that sort of thing. But the policy question of whether to allow businesses or not, and if to allow businesses, what types, or any other specifics like that, we thought, that's really a policy question for council. So we need to have council weigh in before we start trying to draft something. That's why we're here before you tonight. I have some alternatives for you. One would be to make no change in the regulations, and that would prohibit any, what I'll just call standalone kind of businesses or vendors separate from a park reservation. The second one would be allow some businesses. For example, you could, at least for the beginning, concentrate on more just food and drink. And I do think, and unfortunately, Public Works Director Bill Lawyer is in here. I know that he is concerned, and I am too. I think a lot of us about the purpose of the parks, of course, is not to have a place for a bunch of businesses. And I think there is a concern about maybe perhaps too much commercialization of what's really a recreational facility. So that would be one of the options to have just food and beverages. The other one is to allow all businesses to apply, but perhaps limit the number of businesses. I don't have a place to define that, though, or how you would get there. But I mean, that would be one choice. If you do want to choose to allow some or more than a limited amount, any additional directions you could give staff with regard to any time for operation or size would be welcome. Staff does recommend, if council wants to allow some type of businesses, that at least at this time, they'd only be allowed in Keizer Rapids, Claggett Creek, and Chalmers Jones, in the parking lot adjoining the City Civic Center generally. We don't really feel it would make sense in any other locations. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, and I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. A couple of things. Any questions on the staff report? Councilor Reed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm just wondering about ice cream trucks. Already we hear ice cream trucks like in Keizer Rapids Park. Is that not legal then? Okay, good to know.
They keep moving.
I think that would be questionable whether it's legal.
Okay. So I could tell them to go away if if it ever came up.
I don't know if, that issue's been brought up a lot in the past in different locations other than Keizer Rapids too. And I think it really amounts to, technically that's a violation. If they sit there for I don't know, do they sit there for all day or a large portion of the day?
Sometimes.
Is that different than a technical violation or not? But I think, back to your question, Councilor Reed, if the council determines that they do want to allow that, then we would be approaching any businesses that we know would operate and ask them to apply.
Okay. I just wanted to figure out if that was at all relevant to this conversation, so thank you.
It's very relevant. A couple of things that you may want to keep in mind as we have this conversation. One is that we already have a mobile food vendor ordinance so that a property owner can create a site plan, submit it to the city for approval that deals with the location of a food truck vendor on their property, where it has to be, what the regulations under which that food truck must operate. That is, they have to have all of their certifications from Marion County Health Authority. And once we have the site plan approved for that property owner, let's give an example, Copper Creek Mercantile. So they turned in a site plan. They said, we would like to designate this space on our property. They draw it out for the number of spaces, the location, clearances, line of sight, and so forth. It's reviewed by the city. We say yes, no, this works. And then that property owner can have up to that many food vendors on their property. And then the requirement is that that food vendor be current in their licensure and so forth. And then it's between the property owner and the mobile food vendor. So that is a model we already have in place. If we are looking at parks and want to have that conversation, we already have a model under which the city could look at our properties in the same manner and then determine the time, location, so forth, at least in terms of mobile food vendors. If we're looking at other vendors and locations, it can be very similar. The other thing that came up in some conversations that there are other cities that have already done exactly this, where they have looked at their parks and they do actually have designated spaces within their parks for mobile food vendors. And then the potential food vendor then applies to the city as any other property owner. So I just want to set some context that there are precedents both here and in other places that this has been done, is partly why this conversation is coming to us now. That said, we need to get some direction from you all. Do you like this idea? Do you not? And what type and so forth would you prefer? I'll go to Councilor Hussman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A scenario to shape the direction, if you will. Say an individual likes drawing pictures of the trees out at Keizer Rapids Park and sets up, a sketching table and some framed art, something of that nature. That's not necessarily a person who has an LLC or something. Maybe they have a square mate, maybe they don't. It could be just a straight cash business where they're selling some kind of small ware. Mm-hmm. Granted, I don't necessarily know how many of those Keizer Rapids Park may attract, but to me, that's kind of a level of business that we're dealing with, right? Really, really small hawkers, essentially, to a slightly more formal business or a business that may actually be registered to something a little more established, like the food trucks that we see. I guess what I want to do with this question is clarify what levels we're thinking through, because we could wholesale exclude full-on categories of business and say, you need this, you need that, you need this other thing. How far do we want to go?
And that's the question, is what types, exactly that. Do we want to do food and beverage? Do we want to do other types and so forth? And then time, manner, and place. So that is the question before us. Councilor Duran.
That was something I hadn't thought about when we were discussing this in the last couple months. But my opinion is it would need to be somebody that had insurance. It would need to be somebody that had a licensed business to be able to be, I think insurance is probably the biggest thing. Is somebody that can afford to put out what the minimum that would need to be to cover the city and cover themselves in case of an accident or injury. So that'd be the first place I would look, is something that is a substantial business or entity that can cover that minimum expectation.
Okay. So the business, and in all cases, such as in the mobile food vendors, the proof of insurance and appropriate licensure based on the type of business would be a must. Councilor Cross?
I looked at quite a few cities, but for example, some cities have codes where they need a license. The fee it's good for a year, so I think that that's a good start. I would say that we probably don't want to turn into a farmer's market on Saturday. So I think it's a lot easier to start small, maybe with food and drink, and then get bigger. I do also think that because our Parks Committee is so invested in our parks, it would be good feedback to ask them what they think.
Councilor Duran?
So how this really came up in the recent past is my son has a coffee cart, and they go to the city or the Riverfront Park. And they set out, City of Salem has it all lined out. You have to have insurance, you have to have the county permit, and a coffee cart is different than a food vendor. There's different classifications of a vendor. So a coffee cart would be the minimal, and they would like to set up someplace in Keizer Rapids Park. When I was there setting up for Keizer Fest, I was looking at how many people there are there during the day between the Big Toy and the dog park. There's a lot of people. And boy, those people, if they didn't bring coffee with them, would probably be interested in getting a drink right there on site. So thinking about how this could work, I would see it as setting up a place and time, and a permit process that would be minimal, just to make sure that they know what they're supposed to be doing and that they have the required minimal insurance and permits to do what they do. But that's where I'd like to start with this. We have so after thinking about this, we have the pad for the food pods, but there's no way for anybody to use that facility except for a special use permit. So maybe we need to look at how that gets brought up. And also the new soccer fields have places in the design. There is spots for vendor. Well, you're going to want to. Once that's set up, you're not going to have a special use permit for every soccer game. You're going to have a broad use of the facility, and having people being able to come in and reserve a space or something for food trucks is something that is going to have to, we're going to have to figure out something at that point. So why not talk about doing it now?
Councilor Reed?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I see this as a service for the people who are using the parks. Keizer Rapids is far away from everything. Chalmers is far away from everything. Claggett is pretty far, not as. Anyway, so these are all pretty big islands, and so it seems to me that just kind of making that available, if this is a good business prospect or whatever, I think I do see it as a service to our community, to people who use the parks, just to make it a possibility. I would, however, want to specify, if we go with alternative B, that it not be alcoholic beverages.
Right.
I think that's pretty important, seeing as many of our park users are kids, and I would want to see that stipulated.
And currently, alcohol use is not permitted in the park unless, the only time is for special event like Keizer Fest and the concerts, and that's by special event permit. That's a good point. So what I'm hearing is that there is interest in mobile food vendors. Is there anybody who disagrees with that? Councilor Husband.
Counselor Duran, if you don't mind engaging with me on this, if maybe there's not necessarily a mobile food vendor out one day, but it's a hot day. I get a bunch of water bottles. I go put them in a cooler and some ice. I wait a couple hours. I go out to Keizer Rapids Park and I try and sell them each for $1, something like that. How do you define that activity? Just as you're thinking about what business should be in the context of the parks.
If you have a business license and you have insurance, then I don't see any reason that couldn't be allowed, but it needs to be permitted so that the people doing it know what's expected of them, knowing where they can be, not just anybody going out with a cooler selling whatever they have in their cooler.
Okay, I see where you're going. I do think there will be the industrious among us who try to do that in the parks. And it's entirely possible they'll do that whether or not the council endorses it outright. But frankly, I do see that as a consequence of us opening up the parks to business. People are going to take advantage of the friendly environment. So it is somewhat of how permissive do we want to be, or what environment do we want to create around it? Because we're talking a lot about food and beverages right now, which is good, but people sell a lot of things in parks in this region, for sure. Different cities have different attitudes and definitely different restrictions as far as what they can do. So I only bring this up in part to try and spur a little creativity, because I do think that's out there. I think that there are citizens who'd be willing to put a bunch of different items for sale if we so let them.
And I would, like, I hadn't thought about somebody, an artist being out there doing, things that, to me, I don't see an issue with that if they have the required insurance, and if we say that that's allowed. Well, I mean, at some point, we're going to have to say, nah, that probably doesn't fit in with what we want for the park. But that, to me, that would probably be one that I would say, yeah, we could do. But yeah, at some point, we're going to have to make a list. This is what is acceptable, and this is what isn't.
Yeah, and to Councilor Duran's point, insurance. So having a business that's conducting business out there versus an individual with a cooler of water, that's not what we're talking about here. And to Councilor Reed's point about talking about our mobile ice cream vendor coming through right now under our current parks regulations, the answer is no. Now, there's a lot of kids at the Big Toy would be very disappointed. But to put that to a point, we don't allow it at this point. So what we're looking at with the parks is time, manner, and place. And we have to make sure that it is occurring in a place where it is permitted, it doesn't interfere with the quiet enjoyment of the park for all users. And that if someone is trying to sell something that that is not licensed, or as a food vendor doesn't have that sticker, we do not know what's really in there. And I think that's incumbent upon the city, if we're going to have time, manner, and place, that we're going to have to make sure that we have certification for the health and safety of the consumer, is my point of view.
Fair, and I suppose we could also be limiting to just food and beverage. We could, the way this is devised, we could theoretically say all other categories of business are verboten in the park.
Right. However, to the point about your point of of an artist, many of them are LLCs. If they're selling their wares, or they're doing face painting, or if they're doing art at the park, they're going to be a business. And in order to set up, what we're looking for guidance from the council is asking staff to look at the appropriate time, manner, and place to outline, just like we ask for our property owners. Tell us where you want your vendors on your property, and they submit the site plan. We're asking us to be that. Come back with a plan where this can happen, so we don't have somebody popping up in the middle of a walkway and interfering with people's enjoyment of the park and get run down by a bicycle, for example. So I'm going to go back to, I'm hearing that there's interest, at least with mobile food vendors, and we already have a process in place that we use for other property owners. That can be a model. Is there anyone who disagrees with that premise at this point?
No, I just have a clarifying question.
Okay, Council President Starr, and then I'll go to the additional.
So I'm just thinking down the road, and I like the initial plan of limiting it to certain parks. What about the park that's in the middle, or on the, kind of in the middle on the edge of Keizer Station? It's a city park, right?
Ryan Hill Park?
Small, but I'm just like, just wanting us to think about some of this stuff. I think it's a great idea. I would love to be able to get a coffee if I were, at Keizer Rapids Park, or if I were sitting here at the splash pad, or get a lemonade, or whatever that may be. I think it's a great idea. When we're coming back with a plan, I would just love for us to kind of think about some of those things that might not be on the initial radar, but some people might say, might go park over there. And I think that might bring up a couple questions by other business owners that are over in Keizer Rapids. So just a thought. I think you're on the right track, though, about.
Were you talking about Keizer Station?
That's what I meant, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's almost 10. If you look hard, I'm already a pumpkin. I think it's great. I just would try to think about what some of those potential things that might come up from other people asking questions, or that you might find patrolling around because people thought it was all parks, or just think about that.
Councilor Cross?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to piggyback on that, to maybe identify, maybe we start out with certain parks, see how it goes, and go from there. But, is it all of a sudden that Keizer Little League Park has 5, or all of a sudden the soccer field, well, that's going to be happening. I'm not moving my truck. My truck is staying here for the long haul. So just thinking about times, identify exactly where and for how long, or, all of a sudden, is there a broken down food truck on the pod that's hanging out?
Well, and to your point, Little League Park is under contract. So that's a separate one, and we have specified requirements there. And that might open up an opportunity to work with the management organization there for food trucks. But I think he already has that leeway for food trucks, for tournaments, does he not?
In which one, where?
Keizer Little League Park, under the management agreement.
Yeah, I think they have the concessions.
Right, so they have concessions, so that's a separate contract, it's a little bit different. But for the 3 that staff is recommending that we look at, those make sense. I would agree, Keizer Rapids Park, Clyde Creek Park, our Civic Center Park. And then if somebody thinks they're going to just pop in, they're going to be very surprised that, no, this would be, clear time, manner, and place, but also we're going to need a recommendation from staff on for how long. Can they leave that vehicle there overnight? Can they, or do they need to remove it by the close of the park? I don't want to, personally, I don't want to see the parks being used as food truck parking, mobile food vendor overnight storage, because it's not secure.
Yeah, And Shane can answer to you, but we were not anticipating allowing that at all.
Good, okay.
Yeah, I think one thing I would just say, I've done a bit of research on it after the question was raised. You know, you've got mobile food trucks that we think of the taco truck or like the driving vehicle. What I spent some time looking at, and I talked to Salem staff, their parks folks, they have a concessionaires permit program that they started last summer. And they specifically had a focus, they wanted more activities in their parks. So they have kind of a narrow scope that they look at, but generally in Marion County Health or Salem Health that license food vendors, there's different classifications. So the coffee cart model is like, I think it's called a class 1. It's a push cart and it's limited in size. I think it can't be more than, it's either 6 or 8 feet long and 3 feet wide. And that's the kind of thing that currently Salem is allowing in their parks, in certain parks, not every single park, but certain parks. And so I think that when we've talked about it as staff, we've looked at it a little bit more of a narrower scope because, Madam Mayor, you're absolutely right. The food trucks, that ordinance went through a process and then another process, and I feel like another process at some point where we landed and we regulate those quite well. And we as a city can get a premise permit to cover the amphitheater or the future soccer fields, or it can be done specifically to events because we're the property owner. We're in control of it. But this was really looking at more of those smaller business models that wouldn't be licensed as a full-blown food truck because from a staff perspective, those food trucks are taking up parking spots. That's a little different dynamic. So I think those you do want, because of what we've established, what council's established as our protocol, you want a little bit bigger look on a site plan that's very specific. These carts would, I mean, absolutely, it would be, they're there and then they move on. They're not setting up shop and staying there. They'd still be subject to all of our parks rules. So anyway, just for what it's worth, there are kind of some different classifications and how those are regulated and licensed.
But time, manner, and place, they couldn't just be willy-nilly. We would, the point would be that each of these parks would have a plan of where they could be, and to make sure that you have clearances, you have ADA access, it's clear where you can be and when you can't be. So we don't have people just popping up everywhere going, I'm gonna park myself in the middle of this play field, and everybody's gonna be throwing Frisbees over the top. That's a bit of extreme, but I want to make it clear that this is, if we're talking anything here, is going to be organized and clear and transparent so that everybody knows. And we want to make this, I'm sorry for this pun, but it's the only one I can come up with right now, an even playing field. So when you have different, I'm sorry.
Puns aren't allowed after 10 o'clock.
Well, it's not 10 o'clock yet, so I'm good. We want to make sure that it's open for businesses to be able to participate and not have barriers, but also to be equitable. So if I've got 4 different food vendors, they know how to apply, so they can plan ahead for when they're going to be at certain parks. They can advertise on their social media when they're going to be there, and they can prepare their wares for sale, and knowing that they're going to be in Park X, Park Y, Park Z on this rotation, having cleared it with the city. So there has to be predictability for the business as well as for the public in, if we're going to go forward with something like this. Councilor, I'm going to go to Mr. Brown and I'll come back to you, Councilor Asman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. I wanted to ask Councilor Duran, just from his experience, his family, does the, according to what you know about Salem, are they required to tell the city when they're going to be at the park?
I don't think so, because the city, like, the Riverfront Park has quite a few different areas that they could be at.
Yeah.
So I think if they went and their area was being taken up that they wanted to be at, they could move to a different area. So that would be something that we'd have to look at. If there's like 2 areas that could be used at the park over here, we have to figure out how to reserve them or how to do something if there's multiple people. So that is something, but I was going to recommend that we look at how Salem does it, because they've already been doing it. And according to my son and his wife, they feel that it works pretty well for them so far. They would just like to be in Keizer. So that's, looking at how it's done other places would definitely be a way to go, and then figure out how it fits with our model here.
Mr. Witham had a follow-up comment.
Sure, I would just add there are, in Salem, it is pretty much wide open. They do have specified areas that they want the push cart sellers to be on. They do also publish certain blackout dates. So an example would be the World Beat Festival that happened, at the end of July, I guess? Is that right? Yeah, June, end of June? Yeah, it's
Ironman,
already August,
things like
wow.
that.
So like that's a blackout weekend. So nobody can be in the park that weekend because it's all reserved. So that's one of the things that Salem staff had explained. So the event itself, somebody who had that concessionaire's permit, for example, throughout the rest of the summer, and I think they actually do it like a monthly deal how they do it there, but they basically say, hey, during this time you can be there except for these specified dates because there's another event happening. So you'd have to be part of that organized event that's reserving the area. So I think there may be, for example, Keizer Fest that's there that weekend. Probably that's going to be a blackout weekend if that's something that council wants to move forward with, because there's a different user in there, so.
Concert weekends, things like that,
Right.
that would need to include that. You mentioned the concessionaire's permit. So any of the vendors who are in the parks have to display that permit. So they've already gone through the process of submitting their licensing, their insurance, all of the requirements, so that there is no question that this vendor has been approved to be there, so somebody can't come off the street going, ooh, I'm going to pop in next to you. It's like, yeah, no.
Correct.
They are only able to be on the premises in that time, manner, and place if they have already submitted all of their appropriate licensing, insurance, et cetera, so that there's we're looking at, protecting the public, making sure that vendors that are on public space are complying with all of the regulations for food safety and handling. Okay. Councilor Osman, you had a question?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, some of this does dovetail with, I guess, what is my general concern around where I've been going with improvised or less formal businesses that may pop up is regulation does imply enforcement. There's got to be a stick with the carrot. I don't necessarily want every interaction to be leading us down the carceral path. A kid is selling stickers out at the skate park at Chalmers Jones. He's obviously not necessarily licensed. He just made a cool design on his computer, printed it out, and is selling it to his buddies. Someone from the police department comes over, says, hey, what's going on? Not necessarily something we want to escalate. We don't want to be the city that goes viral over a bad lemonade stand interaction. That's something that we're trying to avoid, and we're trying to spell that out, I think, with what we're doing here. And at the same time, I think there's a place for that in the regulation that we ultimately do write, is we write it so that in the event of enforcement, we are trying not to create great conflict. We're just trying to say, hey, we have clear rules. And this is what we're following. To some of the neighborhood kids, we see what you're trying to do. We would just appreciate if you would set foot off city property, sell out of your home, something like that. So we want this to be as easy as possible for all sides, including whom I think may be the more entrepreneurial minded, who are trying to take advantage of a system, but they may also not know the system is set up, because so those people are not necessarily the type to watch city council meetings or closely follow what it is that we're trying to do, unlike the coffee carts and food trucks of the world.
Someone push back a little bit. This is a public space, it's a park, and it has a very specific role in our community for people to enjoy public gathering and outdoor recreation. To set aside a space for people to do business, and they're going to make money, I really want to make sure that that is a secondary use of our parks. So while there might be as you put it, entrepreneur. People who are engaging in business, even a young person, they learn the rules. And a really good mentor to a young person engaged in business is going to insist that that young person learn the rules and to ask the question and to be where they should be. But the primary use of the park needs to remain the park, outdoor recreation. So if we're going to do this, I am very much in favor of limited scope and clear definitions, level playing field for people to engage in business, but for other people to piggyback based on the presence of potential customers, I would really strongly discourage that. We have some wonderful young people who do set up lemonade stands or do sell their art and so forth, there are proper places for that. But we want to make sure that the purpose of the park remains primarily outdoor gathering, recreation, quiet enjoyment. And that if we are looking in setting up business spaces, starting off with food and beverage trucks, that we really look at the scope, keep it limited so that while I would love to have a farmer's market out here, we've tried it a few times with Salem Community Markets. It hasn't taken off yet, but to make sure that it's really clear when that's going to happen, so the rest of the time when people come to enjoy the park, they're there just for that purpose. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. So I really want to discourage the notion that the park, because of the confluence of many people, is a convenient place to come and try to engage in business when you are not really fully invested in being a business, getting your licensing, finding out where, time, manner, and place for you to be there. So if somebody wants to do that in their front yard and the kid wants to sell lemonade, their stickers. I was coming down here one night and there were some kids who had decorated rocks and they were selling those at the corner in my neighborhood. They did a really good job too. But I think that's separate and apart from what we're talking about here, in my opinion. Again, this is a consensus of the council about what direction you want to go. So we have enough, I think, to start with looking at a site plan for food and beverage vendor. Mr. Johnson has a question.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. You just said it right after I raised my hand. Was the consensus at least to start for now, just with food and drink? I think that would make it easier. We can expand it later, but it opens up a lot more questions if we allow more than food and drink.
Yes?
Yep, food and drink at those 3 places specified.
Okay.
Councilor Husband?
As much as I value myself as a pro-business person, starting out with food and drink is the way to go, so I assent.
Okay. Any other comments?
I'm open to exploring the issue.
Anybody else? We have consensus to go ahead and ask staff to bring this back. It's going to be some work, so we want to make sure that if they're going to put this work in, that we're serious about taking a hard look at it.
I'm good with food and beverage.
Okay.
And I would like to set this up in maybe 2 stages and do the basic, like the food cart style that Salem does, and then talk about food truck places in the future. I think that needs to be something that we need to work on, but going with the simple one first sounds like the way to go, with the thought in the future of setting up full-on food truck vendor spots, allowing them, because I got to thinking, I've seen a food truck out here before that I didn't even think about it. It shouldn't have been here.
Perhaps or perhaps not. We have had licensed ones here before.
Right, licensed ones, but they did not have a permit or a contract to be here.
Yeah, they did.
Some of them did.
Yeah.
Some of them went through the process and got a location permit here. And I've heard some didn't, so.
Yeah.
Right, and some of them are part of events that are booked here.
Correct.
So I think there's that going on as well. But to Councilor Duran's point, you know, to be clear, but we do have locations at Keizer Rapids Park now that are mobile food vendor available. So while we could start off with that conversation, I think it very quickly will evolve to include those spaces that are already established.
That's what I'd like to see. I'd like to be prepared for that.
Right, it's gonna be happening pretty quick.
We have the availability, so
Yeah.
why not set up the rules for them to use it?
I would agree because we made it for that purpose. And it's clear that that was the intended use of that space at Keizer Rapids Park. And it could be that space where we look at, it's already a site that's established. We are going to be including paths for mobile food vendors at the turf soccer fields. We're going to have a process in place for those as well. So this is coming quickly. And I think we're going to find a great deal of demand, but we want to make sure we have rules in place that's clear and equitable and, you know, consumer protection, but also protecting our parks for their primary use. Oh, good?
Good.
Good? All right. Looking forward to this. That concludes administrative action. Thank you, everybody, for hanging in there for a very robust conversation. Council President Starr, would you please read the items on tonight's consent calendar?
Yes. Consent calendar, item A, resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with Newman Paving and Curbing Incorporated for paving work at various locations. Consent calendar, item B, resolution authorizing city managers to sign an amendment to the cooperation agreement for community development block grant funds. Consent calendar, item C, approval of August 7th, 2023 regular session minutes. And consent calendar, item D, approval of August 14th, 2023 city council work session minutes.
Thank you very much. Are there any polls? Councilor Reed?
I'd like to pull item C, please.
Item C? Okay, anything else? Council President Starr?
Okay, I move the Keizer City Council adopt consent calendar resolution, or item A, item B, and item D.
Second.
The consent calendars, items A, B, and D have been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed signify by saying no. Hearing no objection, motion passed unanimously, one absent, that's Councilor Kohler. Councilor Reed on item C.
I was not there for that meeting, and though I've read the minutes, I am not qualified to vote on it.
All right, thank you very much. And I do have one correction I'd like to make under public comment. There's a reference to Claggett Creek Street, and I believe it should be Claggett Street. It's the one up here. I think it was, someone was talking about speeding through there, so make that correction. And then on page 6 of the minutes, let me get to that page. Sorry. Scrolling. Paving, nope. There they are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nope, I'm on the wrong one. Sorry. There it is. Okay, it is item, on page 3, 4, 5, 6. I should bookmark these. Under the paragraph where it talks about the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance, and that our continuum of care was the first to use the executive order of, and in this case, it needs to be state funds, not federal. This was the state executive order for funds that was used. So line 3, where it says federal, it needs to be amended to say state. And those are the 2 corrections I have.
Madam
All right.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
the federal should be state was the second paragraph there, is that right?
Correct. That is
Executive
correct.
order, is that correct?
Yeah.
And then on page, was it page 1 of the minutes, the Claggett Creek one?
Yes, it should be, it said Claggett Creek Street, and it should be Claggett Street. It's the one up here by the Wittenberg, wow, that's a blast from the past. Quality,
Best Western.
is that what it is now?
I don't
Yeah.
see it, though.
Thank you, the Best Western.
Here?
I was
Is
going back to
it,
quote.
is it when Hirsch is speaking? In page 1?
No, page 1. Page 2, page 1.
I can find where it said Claggett Creek.
Yeah, it's Tammy's. Yeah. Public comment. It's on page 2. Tammy's comments, a petition for Claggett Creek,
Road. Thank
okay,
you.
clear, safety on Claggett Creek Road, so it should be Claggett Road.
Page
think
2,
it's street,
second
isn't it?
paragraph.
Yes.
Public comments, okay.
Is
Thank
it
you.
Claggett Street or
I'm
Claggett
pretty sure
Road?
it's Claggett Street.
Claggett Street.
Street. Okay, so that'll be corrected. I know, it's just called Claggett, but yeah, you're right. The street and road go different directions according to our development code. All right. Anything else? Council President Starr.
I move that Keizer City Council approve the August 7th, 2023 regular session minutes with the corrections noted.
Second?
Item C, as corrected, has been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed signify by saying no. Abstentions?
Aye.
Motion passes with 5 aye, an abstention from Councilor Reed, and Councilor Kohler is absent. Thank you very much. Other business, this time is provided to allow the mayor, city council members, or staff an opportunity to bring new oral matters before the council that are not on tonight's agenda. Mr. Brown, is there anything the staff would like to bring forward tonight under other business?
No, Madam Mayor, we do not have any other.
Okay, thank you very much. I do have one item, and it's actually going to be part of my report as well. Many of you can see in front of me a number of beautiful items that have been provided. This week, we are enjoying the students, the mayor and his wife from the city of Iyo in the Ehime Prefecture of Japan. This has opened up opportunities to engage in economic and cultural conversations, not just with our students, but also between our two cities. Mayor Takashi has, and I will get this to you, I can't read this one, of course, because it's in Japanese and I don't speak that. Here's the English one. In his letter to the city of Keizer, and in many of his comments prior to and as part of this, as we begin this week with them here, he would like to, and I would like to bring to council the proposal that we move forward with learning about what a sister city relationship with Iyo, Japan could look like. And I just want to bring that to everybody's attention and see if there's any objection to moving forward with bringing a proposal back to council regarding a sister city relationship. Any comments?
Woohoo!
All right. I will take that as a yes to move forward. Mr. Brown has worked at a city where there has been a sister city relationship before and can help us in this process. And I do want to personally thank Mayor Takashi and the folks who have organized this, Katsumi Ito and Ed Davis from East Salem. And this is from the Salem Keizer Iyo International Exchange Committee. The students were here today. We had an absolutely delightful time as they got to see life from this side of the dais. And this is the baseball that Mayor Takashi threw last night at the Volcano Stadium. And he has the one that I threw. We signed them and exchanged baseballs at that time. So I want to thank the Walkers and the Mavericks Independent League for welcoming the students and our distinguished guests. All of you have received the information and the invitation to the formal reception on Wednesday evening, I believe beginning at 6 p.m. at Salem Convention Center for welcoming our guests, the mayor and the delegation from Iyo, Japan. So if you have any questions about that, please get a hold of me. I am really looking forward to this week with our guests. All right, staff updates. Mr. Brown.
I have no further
All right,
updates.
thank you. Mr. Wood.
Madam Mayor, City Council, just wanted to pass along that we received notice from the Government Finance Officer Association that for the 24th year in a row, we received the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. This is for our fiscal year June 30th, 2022 annual financial report.
Congratulations.
Yay.
24 years in a row. That is a very high standard.
That is a lot of years, and as long as I'm here, I hope that we can continue this tradition.
I have no doubt that that will indeed continue. Thank you very much. Congratulations to you and your team. Ms. Bissett. Chief,
Oh, man.
how was Blast Camp?
It was a blast, I understand. Got cut short by the heat a little bit, but they still made it happen.
That's outstanding. And I understand it was a full, every slot was filled by the kids.
It was full.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for doing that and finding partners to make that happen even with the heat.
Well, and thanks to Andrew Copeland for largely making it happen. And some excellent volunteers, but on the PD side, he really spearheaded it. So thank you.
Well done. Please give him our sincere thanks. Congratulations. Mr. Witham.
Nothing this evening. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Nothing. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
All right. I do have one more thing, and then we have a retirement at our police department. Sergeant Leday has finally decided that he found the way to go ahead and actually really retire. And that will be, his last day is next week.
Well, his last day of work is September 1st.
September
There'll be a small gathering. One of these rooms over here.
All right. So that email was sent out to everybody to come and thank Sergeant Leday for his service to our community. I would encourage people to do so. Cards and letters are also very much appreciated to thank him for his extraordinary service to Keizer in our community. All right. Council member reports. Councilor Cross?
Let's see, last couple weeks, on Thursday, August 10th, I attended Latino Business Alliance Pan Dulce and got to listen to Salem Police Chief Womack. That was great. Then headed over to the YMCA Veterans Housing ribbon cutting, which was awesome, and that was a great ceremony. And then ran over to Keizer Fest, the kickoff sponsorship luncheon. That night, I poured at Keizer Fest, the beer and wine, so that was fun. And then the next day started back with the Willamette Valley greeters and listened to Marion County Sheriff, the new Marion County Sheriff, and County Commissioner Bethel. And then I had tons of fun judging the parade floats and with City Council President Starr. And then this past weekend, I went and just spent a little bit of time at the annual Boys and Girls Club Brewfest at the Convention Center, where all the proceeds go to Boys and Girls Club. There you go.
All right, fantastic. Community all the way. Councilor Duran, you survived Keizer Fest as well. You're here.
I did, and I finished up a few last things in the last few days, and we are almost done, except for the stages still need to be removed from the festival grounds, and we'll get around to that next week maybe, or maybe this week, we'll see. All I really want to say is this Saturday, the summer concert in the park with JFK, this last concert at the amphitheater for the year, at least that the Chamber's putting on. And then I want to put a plug for Serve Fest this weekend on the 27th. I will probably not be here. I'm supposed to be out of town this weekend, but I've helped with this for, I don't know how many years, 9-10 years we've been doing it, something like that. But my sister will be there cutting hair. So if you see her, say hi to me, or hi to her for me, because I will not be there.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate Lake Point Community Church for this ongoing event that blesses so many people in our community. Council President Starr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So have attended the library, Keizer Community Library Board meeting. And so we'll be also supporting them in a board training at the end of September. And then how to do effective board governance and board roles. Also attended the Marion County Public Safety Coordinating Council meeting on the 8th. On the 11th and 12th, volunteered at the Keizer Fest tent in the evenings, and then attended the sponsor luncheon as well on Thursday. And then, as Councilor Cross said, we judged the parade, did not fall out of the Jeep, so that was a good thing.
Your insurance carrier also appreciates that.
Yep. And then, you know, I had to giggle and chuckle when it was mentioned about the lemonade stands, because on Saturday, I spent a significant amount of time with a enterprising young individual here in Keizer who had their 3rd annual lemonade stand, where all of the money that she raised goes to buy school supplies for kids in foster care. So anybody tried to shut her down, they would have had to get through me first. So, wink, wink. And then upcoming this week, just a reminder, we have the Keizer Community Dinner on Wednesday evening. And then on Thursday evening, we're hosting, but the city of Keizer here at the Keizer Civic Center is hosting U.S. Representative Andrea Salinas. So please make a point to come to that at 5:30.
Fantastic, absolutely. Councilor Husband.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to thank Steve Kubishta, David Anderson, and Jenna Berman of ODOT, as well as a few anonymous crew members. Pursuant to the little bit of hell we raised in early July, a little birdie told me to go check out the MLK Parkway path recently, and I discovered a few spots between Keizer Station, Area D, where and the intersection with the broader path as it's going southbound, that ODOT had fixed a few cracks in the pavement with some new asphalt. Yay. It was very nice of them. They didn't fix the tree roots, so we're going to contact them about that, but it's a start. Your tax dollars at work. Thanks to ODOT for helping us out on that one. It will make the ride smoother for a lot of people who use that path. And also congratulations to the incoming 6th graders. I believe this week is your week to get acclimated to your new middle school. You're going to do great.
Hear, hear. Thank you very much. Councilor Reed, speaking of school starting.
Yes, that will be starting for teachers next week, and then for students after Labor Day is how that's working. So I attended the Keizer Heritage Foundation board meeting, and it's great to see those tenants working so closely together. Really good things happening there. They're working on the ADA doors being installed, so that is a really good step forward. The museum needs a lot of volunteers still, so if you are interested in volunteering for the museum, please contact them through their website. I gave Japanese students a tour today at the Cultural Center, and that was lots of fun. You know, great bunch of kids, really. They loved it. I would venture to say the museum was their favorite thing, and they really had a good time going through all of the organizations in the Cultural Center. And it kind of occurred to me that, you know, probably our own middle schoolers don't know that building as well as those kids do now. So I would really encourage you to get in there and see what's going on there. So that was a lot of fun. I got to judge the mayor's pet parade during the Keizer Fest parade, and that was great fun. I know Kathy is loath to give that up because of the mayor's conference, but I certainly loved stepping in for that, so that was lots of fun. With school starting, McNary is welcoming our new principal, Scott Gregg. And so that will be, I would just like to thank Eric Jesperson for being absolutely wonderful for all of these years. And we will sorely miss him. But we are happy to have Scott Gregg come into that position. He has been an assistant principal at McNary for several years, and so it should be a smooth transition. The Keizer Homegrown Theater is sponsoring a night of opera on September 8th, 9th, and 10th, so that will be an interest. It's not part of their regular season, but it is an opportunity for to see some good opera. And that is all I have to say. Sports started for McNary last week. So you see the cross-country kids running all over the town. That's what that's about.
Fantastic. And we wish all of our student athletes a very healthy and positive sports season coming up.
And the band.
And the bands, yes. Talk about athletes.
Yes.
They are truly student athletes. You know, try marching, blowing into that clarinet, and staying in your place and in tune at the same time.
In the hot outfits.
Oh, I know. They don't make those things breathe.
No.
Just a couple of things to add. Again, thank you to Councilor Reed, Council President Starr, and Councilor Cross for all of the things you took care of so I could attend the mayor's conference. It was a fantastic conference, meeting with over 80 mayors from across the state. There are 241 cities. And because of the generous donations that Councilor Cross was able to obtain for our basket, we had a wonderful array of baskets for our silent auction. We raised over $10,000 for scholarships that will allow cities from smaller cities and their mayors to be able to participate in this very important conference that helps mayors network, help each other out, answer questions, and do our job even to a greater ability. So thank you so much, Councilor Cross, and thank you to everybody who participated in that. The August edition of Coffee with Kathy is now on the air. It's on my Facebook page, and it will be on Keizer 23. So Betty Hart from the Fire District, and she and I did the program together. We brought information from many of our local partners from the school district, Chemeketa, and Chariots. And watch for next month in September when we'll have the whole crew back for the September broadcast. Coming up tomorrow night is Trashy Tuesday. I think there's one more in September, and this has been a great outreach by our environmental division and volunteers from our community to keep our waterways clean. State Fair opens on Friday. I know there's a lot of young people who will be working there. Watch for traffic heading to our state fairgrounds, and it's going to be a great fair for everyone. That is all I have right now. Looks like some of the meetings that we'll be having will be starting up in September, so maybe we'll catch a little bit of a break. Agenda input on Tuesday, September 5th at 7 p.m. We will meet in regular session. On Monday, September 11th, as announced earlier, we will have our city parks tour. And on Monday, September 18th at 7 p.m., we will meet in regular session. I have a request from council. So to do a second work session in September. Recently, there was some conversation around the work of the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance, and I realized that we have not had an in-person report from our new executive director, Elaine Lozier. We have not had the executive director of the Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency, which is one of our largest service providers in our area, to come and talk to us. And we also have great partnerships between our code enforcement and police with community action and our other service providers. With council's concurrence, I would like to organize a work session regarding the work on housing and homelessness, bring you all up to date on what we're doing in our 2-county continuum, and that would be for the 4th Monday in September. Councilor Cross.
Would we consider inviting, because it is all about the homeless, like a Soaring Heights to that too?
They're on my list.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, I also want to include Keizer-based service providers, Soaring Heights. I will invite Dan Clem from Union Gospel Mission is another service provider through Samanka Place here. and have them at the table as well. They are also part of the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance, either through the collaborative committee or in the case of Union Gospel Mission, they're on the board. So that would be a yes. Comments? Are we willing to get you all up to speed on what's happening, since there's been so many changes since the beginning of the year, and especially to hear I'm hearing great stories about the collaboration with code enforcement and our police, specific to partnering with community action. I'm gonna go follow up with Councilor Cross, and I'll go to Council President Starr.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Will we be talking about some of the stuff I've been reading regarding the opiate funds that will be available and what those can be used about? Or is this just primarily what avenues and resources are available for people without housing?
At this point, my proposal is that we just get everybody up to speed on where we're at. I think that's a separate conversation regarding the use of the opioid funds. We will need to get a staff update on what we can use them for. There are limitations. And I think once we all are on the same page on where we are partnering, collaborating, and the kinds of services that are occurring here, then I think that would be a good time to have a good conversation to follow up on the use and allocation of the opioid funds. I think that a separate conversation specific to that would be wise. If anybody disagrees, we can try to fold it in. Okay. Are we good with that? Council President Starr.
Just on behalf of the Community Diversity Engagement Committee, I think it would be remiss if we at least didn't recognize that that is Yom Kippur holiday. So they would, just on behalf of that committee.
Okay. Duly noted. And if that does turn into a problem, because that is a high holy day for for people of the Jewish faith, we can look at another date. At this point, I'll leave it to the discretion of our city recorder as we work together on contacting these agencies to put together this work session. But I'm really looking forward to you all hearing and being able to have a conversation with these service providers and to meet Elaine. She was just recently hired as the first actual employee of the Homeless Alliance. So we've been working just with contractors up to this point, but the funding level is stable enough where we could actually hire that position. And she hails from Dallas. She was homeschooled. She has tremendous passion and intellect regarding serving people and very holistically. So I've been really, it's been a pleasure to get to know her. Councilor Cross.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just real quick, I know it's getting late. I feel like when we have that many people in a room, we can, just get carried away. I would suggest if there's a way we can even just limit, like, hey, we want the 5-minute spill, and then maybe have some times for Q&A, that would be awesome.
Noted. Yes. And then reports, we can get the reports from the Homeless Alliance to you for pre-reading. Everything is on the website for the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance, so that way you can do some pre-reading there. And if there's specific questions you would like our service providers to, or the Executive Director Lozier to address, please get those to us in advance so we can get them to her so she can come prepared to talk about that. Okay? And then I would encourage, we'd love to have Ben here and then a representative from the police department to talk about some of the great work that has been happening, especially this year, to continue to improve and grow the relationships that we have across our continuum. Okay, any questions on that? All right, so that'll be for the 28th. The reason it is the end of September is I believe October, our work session will probably be at the end of October for the strategic plan. Yeah, that's what I thought. And the second Monday, or second Tuesday, Monday, good Lord, we do need to adjourn. We have penciled in personnel policies. Okay, anything else for the good of the order? Thank you all for fantastic work tonight. Really appreciate everybody's input. The time is 10:37. We are adjourned.